Pledge of Allegiance fair there, last week. So we're waiting or what? Not waiting. Huh?
So, not seeing anything yet.
Let's convene the hearing.
Kind of a dog pick.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. There's the flag today.
Oh, really? I'm just here to swear somebody
I
in.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Villalobos, will you make the TV coverage announcement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to the Commission. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV, Channel 20, at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, Santa Maria, and Orca areas. Rebroadcasts of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays at 5 p.m. on CSB TV, Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two.
Well, we're going to do something different today. We all said goodbye to Cecilia Brown last week, so we're saying hello to Laura Bradley. And so we're going to have the administration of oath of office to our newly appointed 2nd District Commissioner.
Good morning.
Morning, Mike Allen will conduct the oath.
Yes, thank you, honorable members of the Commission. Good morning. I am Mike Allen, and welcome, Laura. And if you would go up to the podium. Thank you. I will administer the oath of office. It's my honor to do so. Laura, if you would just please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation,
without any mental reservation,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which
the duties upon which
I'm about to enter.
I am about to enter.
Congratulations. Please take your seat at the dais,
Thank
and
you.
good luck to the Commission today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Well, my wedding took less time than that. It's an impressive oath, especially the without mental reservation part. I have to ponder that. And we are so happy to have you here that we're thinking of voting you in as our vice chair, right? And will someone make that motion?
So I don't think that's actually agendized for today, but we can.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no,
So
sorry.
we can't do it yet?
No, I can put it on the agenda next time.
All right,
but,
well, that's fair warning that the next time you see us, we're going to vote you in as vice chair, and you'll want to follow these procedures because you'll be chairman in just a few months. Now you have mental reservations. Okay. Well, all that being said, let's go on to the roll call. Will you conduct that, Mr. Villalobos?
Sure. Commissioner Bradley,
Here.
Commissioner Cooney,
Here.
Commissioner Blau,
Here.
and Chair Park.
Here.
I believe Commissioner Farini will be in soon.
Yes, I think he's already shown up in Santa Barbara and will be here soon. Yeah, so he was early there. So we'll give him credit. Okay. Mr. Wilson, can you give us the agenda status report?
Chair Park, members of the Commission, thank you, and I would like to also welcome Commissioner Bradley for joining us and look forward to working with you in the future. Moving to the status of the agenda today, There's 3 items listed on the standard agenda. The first item, as you may be aware, there's been a request by the applicants to have that removed from the agenda and be placed on at a later date be determined later. But we can take that up when we get to that item on the standard agenda.
That makes sense. Thank you.
The other 2 items, the telecommunication and then the Keysight 2, staff is prepared and ready to present on both of those items today.
Very good. Now, can you also present on the projection report?
Chair Park, members of the commission, looking at the projection report, our next scheduled meeting will be on August 28th, and that will be in Santa Barbara. There are 3 items agendized for that item. Oh, and just for the information of the Planning Commission, the item listed as Busy Bee Organics, which is an appeal, that has been requested by both the applicants and the appellants to be moved off of the August 28th. So that no noticing or anything has occurred on that, so that's just a request to staff. So that item will be rescheduled at a later date, and that'll show up on the projection report as we finalize that date between both the appellants and the applicants. And then on August 28th, we do have that item that will be coming back for findings for denial on August 28th from the Earth LLC. Our next item will be on September 4th, and that is also going to be a Santa Barbara hearing, and there are 2 items currently listed on that, both of them appeals. One is an appeal of a proposed fence, and the other one is a appeal of a homestay application. And as it listed, that Commissioner Cooney will be absent on that day, potentially. And then moving forward, we have no items listed on September 11th at this point. And then moving forward, we canceled that item and it was rescheduled as a special hearing on September 13th with the follow-up on the 2 appeals. And it is not listed on the projection report, but we had discussed at our last meeting for staff to provide a presentation to the Planning Commission on the program EIR and how that is being used for permitting and seek review on these cannabis projects. So we'll add that to the projection report so that everyone is aware of what's going to occur on September 13th. The next hearing after that is scheduled for September 25th, and that is again in Santa Barbara. We have the Helistop application coming back for review and consideration, as well as 2 appeals, and then the long-range planning is bringing the Santa Claus Lane Beach project for review and consideration on September 25th. October 2nd, as of right now, there are no items scheduled for that date. October 9th, there's 1 item scheduled and that'll be in the Santa Maria hearing. And there's a potential for 2 other items to be added to that. We are working with the Busy Bee appeal may end up on that day, as well as there's another project, the Halama Beach Park improvement, that could end up on the October 9th hearing date here in Santa Maria. And then on October 30th, there's no items projected. And then November 6th, 1 item is projected from long-range planning, which is zoning ordinance package amendments. And then moving forward to November 13th, we have another cannabis project that's scheduled for the Santa Maria hearing. Other projects that are pending, as I mentioned, is the Halama Beach. That could be an October 9th hearing, as well as staff is working on completing the draft EIR and identifying a hearing date for the Oasis project, and that would be a Santa Maria hearing. And so we're looking at, that could potentially be, depending on how the hearing and items are projected, it may be a November hearing due to it being a Santa Maria hearing. But we're anticipating trying to get the draft EIR released in September. Going for the public review period and then scheduling for hearing October, November. That concludes the projection.
Well, thank you. let's go on to public comment. And this would be,
Just a comment about the projection report. I'm anticipating you're going to have a rather large audience when the Oasis project comes before us. You might want to think about that being a single item day. Just so you know, it wouldn't surprise me if there were 50 to 100 seniors in this room when that occurs. Just for your thoughts.
So Chair Park, Commissioner Blau, thank you for that information. And that might be an item that we coordinate with, and if there's no items scheduled on a hearing, we may change a hearing location to Santa Maria to be able to accommodate that. So we're looking down the road. Currently, there's no items projected on October 30th. There is a potential, I think, for a South County project to be scheduled for that day. Actually, there is one that has not been on the projection report. So we'll look down the road and coordinate with the applicants on Oasis for a Santa Maria hearing date.
well, yeah, and definitely if we're going to have that much public comment and it's going to come from here, let's get that hearing moved up here if at all possible. Yeah, and I know there's always an issue of what hearing rooms are available, so the sooner we look into that, the better we'll be.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't know if this is the time to explain it, but I have one absence planned the rest of the year, and that would be on October 30th. I will not be here. It's just the time I would explain that. So, okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, now we'll move on to public comment on items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any speaker slips for that? I don't believe we do then. Then we'll go on to our planning commissioners' informational reports. Do any of the commissioners have informational reports? Then our director's report. Who will deliver that?
Chair Park, members of the commission, in Director Plowman's absence, I will give a brief director's report. There's been one Board of Supervisor hearing since our last meeting of last week, which was yesterday. There were only 2 items that may be of interest to the Planning Commission. One, they were both administrative items. One was a contract amendment for Keysite 1 to continue with the environmental review that's occurring on that proposed project. And then there was a public convenience and necessity item that was before the Board of Supervisors for a wine and beer outlet in the San Ynez Valley area. So both of those items were approved by the board yesterday. The board did take action on the minutes of the July 16th that was related to the cannabis hearing, and they approved the minutes as they were presented yesterday. So looking at the long-range calendar for the Board of Supervisors, the Patterson Avenue Holdings that was before you some time ago is scheduled to go on September 10th to the Board of Supervisors on appeal. And then the knee tennis court appeal is scheduled, it was appealed from the Planning Commission decision, and that's scheduled to go on October 1st to the Board of Supervisors. And then next week on August 20th, there are 2 items at the Board of Supervisors that may be of interest to the Planning Commission. One is the ordinance changes to the business license regulations that's related to the cannabis business license, and that will be before the board next Tuesday. And then the appeal of the G&K Farms cannabis cultivation operation is also scheduled for next Tuesday in Santa Barbara before the Board of Supervisors. And one other item
Sure.
for the director's report. So staff is, the department has been working to increase our staffing on both the cannabis and regular development projects. And so I do want to introduce a new staff member today. Her name is Tina Mitchell, and she's assigned to the Santa Maria office, North County. So we'd like to welcome, Tina Mitchell as part of the team. She'll be working on development review projects in the Santa Maria office. And then we also have hired another cannabis team member. She's going to be assigned to South County. Her name is Dara Elkurdi. We can introduce her when we get to Santa Barbara hearing. Elkurdi. And then on Monday, we have two more staff members, one in energy and one in cannabis, that will be joining us on Monday, the 26th. And then we're continuing to move forward with increasing our staffing, and so we can bring those updates to you as they occur.
Thank you. Speaking of staffing, has the consultant been hired yet for the development of the farm stay ordinance?
Chair Parkman's Commission,
If
I
you
can
know.
bring that information back to you. I
Sure.
know that we're actively seeking a consultant to do that. I don't know the current status of that.
The reason I ask is
Contract.
I'm in the process of getting another forum scheduled on that subject, and this time I'd like to invite the consultant if we have one. So, and if we're about to have one, then I'd try to schedule it so they're available. If not, then we'll make it work. Before we go to the next item, which is the standard agenda, I want to address something that is important for presentation of staff reports, for the colloquy we have here, for public comment. I'd like people to indulge me on something, and this is especially important when we have these brand-new planners here. If you go into a courtroom and you refer to an older attorney like me as Mr. Park, that's expected, and the judge will chastise you if you refer to a 28-year-old young female attorney as Clara or Jane or something like that. You're supposed to use their last name. And I want to adopt the same thing here. It sometimes bothers me a little bit to be addressed as Commissioner Park and so forth, but then have my clerk addressed in a public hearing as David, or to have a new staff member addressed by their first name. It doesn't give them the proper respect that's due their position. So and I'm saying this, it's not just to the public, but for all of us here at these tables. Let's try to remember to not refer to each other by first name in the hearing. So there you go. Will you read the first item into the agenda, Mr. Villalobos?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of ERG Operating Company to consider case numbers 14 PP1, 14 DVP9, applications filed on June 3rd, 2014, and for certification of the Environmental Impact Report, case 15 EIR4.
Morning, Mr. Briggs.
Good morning.
Do you have a staff report for us today? Bet it might be kind of short, but I don't know.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, today ERG has requested to be removed from your agenda to be placed on at a later date. The reason for that was that they were in the process of developing a greenhouse gas mitigation plan that your commission requested some time ago. They are putting careful attention into that plan and have not yet finished it. And so they had requested to be dropped from the agenda until they're able to finish it and then return at a later date. So in the meantime, the company has been purchased by another entity known as TerraCore. And the CEO of TerraCore is here today and would be happy to answer commission questions. And then, of course, we also have Mr. Nathan Eady here to answer any planning-related questions. So staff is here. We are also available to respond to anything that you guys have. And I'll leave it at that.
Let me just get clarification from our staff that's here. I know that a motion to continue would take, or rather a request for a continuance would take a motion from our commission. Does this request require a motion? Yes. And then if it does, then we should have public comment on that, correct? Yes. Okay. Then Commissioner Cooney?
I had a question for Mr. Briggs.
Sure.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Mr. Briggs. I realize that taking a matter off agenda has certain consequences, one of which is that it may be some time before we see the project back. And I can't remember from our hearing several months ago as to what, if anything, in the way of non-compliance with the current permit is in place at this time and would be continuing without enforcement. And there may be nothing on this project, but often on large projects like this, the partial purpose of going forward with a new development plan is to cure lack of development or lack of compliance with prior conditions. Is there anything like that we need to be aware of?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Cooney, in the case of ERG, we do not have any non-compliance issues or open violations that are unresolved at this time.
Thank you.
Very good. Well, I think our next thing then, we should call on the applicant to make whatever presentation they desire to make in this, with regard to the request for taking it off calendar.
Good morning, Chair Park, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Mark Depew, and I'm actually the COO of TerraCore. It's my pleasure to introduce our company to you and to express how excited we are truly to be taking over ownership and operations of the Cat Canyon field that was operated by ERG previously, and specifically the West Cat Canyon Revitalization Project. TerraCore has its corporate headquarters in Denver, Colorado, but we have operations and experience in oil field development throughout the western United States, and specifically here in Santa Barbara County. My own background includes working along the central and southern coasts of California for many years, most recently as a CEO of a local oil company here as well. It has enabled me to gain an in-depth understanding of how to do business here in Santa Barbara County, and more specifically, again, dealing with the comprehensive regulatory environment that is here. Our team of experienced and skilled California field operators will essentially remain the same that has been operating the field without incident for the past many years. However, we'll be bringing some key individuals from TerraCore into the operation to bring added accountability, experience, and expertise that will be integral to our success as an operator and the project that is before you. Specifically, our CEO, Will McConaughey, along with his wife and his family, are actually in the process of relocating as we speak to the area right now. Will and others on our team will seek to bring innovation to these existing operations with the goal of making our field more efficient and less impactful with respect to a variety of energy-saving initiatives and emission reduction programs that we have in mind. Our team also has a great deal of experience in solar and other renewable energy technologies. That's why we're here before you today, seeking and requesting a window of opportunity to accomplish a few critical issues that will not only benefit the project, but the community as well. Specifically, we're asking for some time to transition safely the operations, now under the leadership of TerraCore. The safety of our workers, the environment, and the public is and will remain our #1 concern and priority. We also need some time to identify and develop opportunities that will further improve our existing operations. And finally, we look forward to our team working with your staff in developing a solar energy component to this project, the West Cat Canyon Revitalization Project. This will not only serve to mitigate greenhouse gas impacts from the project and provide critical energy needs for our operations, but also provides a foundation for us to become an energy company of the future as we transition away from fossil fuels. Nathan Eady from SES Engineers is here to answer any questions you may have related to our requested continuance and remaining processing of our project. So on behalf of TerraCore, I thank you again, allowing us to speak here and being here before you today. We look forward to coming to you again in the very near future with our recommendations to our project that will not only provide benefits to the company's long-term outlook, but also to the residents of Santa Barbara County as well. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for introducing yourself and your company, and I look forward to dealing with you and your new management team if you think that would be helpful.
It should be, and it will be, I can assure you.
All right.
No question.
Question from for Commissioner Blau.
Yeah, any ideas when you might be coming back with the revised project? Is it 6 months away or a year, or just
Well, I'm-
curious?
I'm not sure exactly when we will have an answer for you, but I can assure you within the next several weeks, we should be in touch with staff and start the process of coming up with some of the different solutions, at least ideas that we have bouncing around right now. I can assure you of that.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Depew, and Chair and Commissioners. Good morning. Nathan Eady with SCS Engineers. Mostly here just to answer any remaining questions, and I can hopefully follow up on a couple of questions that the Commission already had. So just to reiterate on Commissioner Cooney's question, so ERG and now TerraCore are fully operating under existing approved permits. There are no outstanding code enforcement issues that need resolution. This project was simply to approve additional expansions to the field. The county actually issued several production plans to these assets back in the late 80s and early 90s, and the operator continues to conform to those permits that were approved at that time. Commissioner Blau, so we will be working with TerraCore and staff to come back in, as Mr. Depew mentioned, probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks. We'll start to meet with staff with some conceptual ideas of how we'd like to change the project. And then by the time that filters through, revisions to our project description, updates to the EIR, going through this portion of the planning process and kind of a repetition of the cycle we've been through already, I would expect it'll probably be several months before we're back at the commission, which is why we're not asking for a continuance to a date certain. Better to just pull us from the agenda today, and then we'll coordinate with staff when we're ready to return to the commission, at which point in time the project will be entirely renoticed, which is probably appropriate because we'll have added a pretty substantial solar component to the project.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Eady.
Thank you.
What we should do first is something I forgot to do at the beginning, is we should first make any ex-parte or site visit disclosures. Anyone? Okay, I spoke yesterday with Mr. Eady about this subject, and also with Linda Kropp of EDC about the same subject, so those are my disclosures. Okay, I think we should have a motion on the floor before we go to our public comment, so our public commenters will know what to comment about.
I'm happy to make that motion.
Commissioner Blau?
This is a 4th and 5th district issue, but I think, Mr. Chair, that I think you need to ask for other public comment first, and then I'll make the motion after the public comment's done.
Well, that's fine with me. Now the public knows at least what's under consideration.
Mr. Chair, just before you get started, I just wanted to point out we're having some issues with the fax machine. We do have at least 2 speakers in Santa Barbara.
Okay, just remind me, we'll plug them in. Let's start with what we have in Santa Maria then. As you know, our general rules are please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Speak to what's before us on point. And if you take less than 3 minutes, we'll think you're a hero. So let's start with Roy Reed. And after Roy Reed, we'll have Jonathan Ullman.
Hi, my name is Roy Reed. Good morning to the members of the board and the chair. I live in Santa Maria, own a ranch in the Gary Sisquoc area that's immediately neighboring the ERG project. I'm also a director of the National Association of Petroleum Royalty Owners. Just like to speak here today and just say in the past, ERG has always been an excellent neighbor and operator. I'm gratified at the prospects that TerraCore will continue and even improve that relationship over time. As an owner and a resident of the county, I think the board and the residents of the county should welcome having new eyes, new ideas, and new innovation applied to this project. And I would urge the board to give them time to get acquainted, to review the project, and to incorporate their new ideas and thinking. And in order to do so, would certainly ask that you grant the request to remove it from today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Jonathan Ullman, to be followed by Ken Huff.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, members of the board of the commission. My name is Jonathan Ullman. I hope you had a great summer. I'm the chapter director of the Los Padres chapter of the Sierra Club, representing 42,500 members and supporters. First of all, I wanted to say that concerning the solar panels, the solar panels should have been in this EIR from the start, this plan for the solar panels. But second of all, this is a greenwashing attempt. It's an attempt to make it look like a green project, when in fact we know what this project is. It's using some of the most carbon-intensive drilling on the planet. This is a delay tactic as well. In order to actually heat the water required for this project, you would need 1,000 acres. Is that what they're planning on doing? The new CEO said this is, quote, a compliment, but that they are an energy company of the future as we transition away from fossil fuels. Why don't you just make the whole project solar right now? That would achieve the goals of transitioning away from fossil fuels. They would have support from everybody. They would not be fought. And they could actually make a profit. That's what we need to do. Oil drilling is 1% of the employment and 1% of the tax base of Santa Barbara County. The future is in solar. They should switch to solar. That's an appropriate use for the entire project. Thank you.
Next speaker will be Ken Huff, be followed by Katie Davis.
Good morning, Chair Park and Commissioners. I'm Ken Huff, Executive Director of Santa Barbara County Action Network. For 17 years, SBCAN has been working to improve transportation, protect farmland, and support affordable housing and generally sustainability. For 7 years, I've been Executive Director, and when I started, just about exactly 7 years ago, I thought I was going to be working on transportation and housing issues, and the first thing I walked into was Santa Maria Energy, and we had EDC as our attorneys on that project, and we had some wins. We got protections for the California tiger salamander. We got the reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from 70,000 tons to 10,000 tons. Since then, of course, the county's adopted a 1,000 ton threshold. And next up was the Pacific Coast Energy on Orchid Hill, and the seep cans and more steaming and the problems that would create to cause more oil to seep. And the commission denied that, and the denial was upheld by the county board. And now for several years, we've been working on this ERG one. You know, those other projects had their problems. PCEC was particularly a bad one, but these are worse in Cat Canyon. And the reason that they're worse is because they all overlie the Santa Maria Valley groundwater basin, which 200,000 people depend on for drinking water, and the agriculture of this productive valley depends on that aquifer. And that we now know that there are at least 60 places where petroleum, constituents of petroleum have got into the groundwater. They're not all oil wells, but some of them are. And there's places where there's been, well, there's one that was on the Greca Lloyd lease where there was a big leak right from the injection well, as I understand it, right into the aquifer. It's in litigation, so I haven't been able to get any definitive information about where that stands and what's going to be done to remedy it. And then there's change of company, and then there's bankruptcy and so on. And what are we all going to be stuck with? Possibly a real big problem with our valuable groundwater. Now, we're always assured with these new projects that as you go through the groundwater and then below this supposedly impermeable layer, that there's no way that the oil or the wastewater is going to leak out because there's so many casings. But there's also hundreds of wells that have been abandoned that all create a potential pathway, and there are other potential pathways. So high-pressure steam into the ground under our aquifer is really a non-starter for us, and the project should be denied. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Huff. Katie Davis. Katie, you're here. And to be followed by Ana Rosa Rizzo Centino.
Good morning, Chair Park, Commissioners. My name is Katie Davis. I'm Chair of the Sierra Club Los Padres chapter, representing our thousands of members in the county, including in the project vicinity. The thing I want to point out about this project, the new ownership and this continuance is this: small operators are risky operators. The 1.2 million gallon Chevron spill caused by cyclic steam injection recently in Kern at least has Chevron resources to clean it up. This ERG acreage was actually once owned by Chevron, but they got out. This is an area Chevron considered played out. ERG is a bare bones operation now, and they're putting the county at risk every moment they continue to operate. And remember, someone died out there already, and they have spilled more than any other onshore operator. This is not an area without incident. And that was due to corporate negligence, that death. Small operators are risky operators. We see this with Greca, which owes millions to thousands of creditors, including the county. Veneco, which left the taxpayers and state to clean up and remediate. The Corone, which couldn't even afford its lease payments and was recently terminated, the last state water lease off of Santa Barbara County. Conventional oil is played out, and we're in a new era of risky speculators and riskier steam injection. The new owner of this project, TerraCore, purchased bankrupt ERG's assets in a discounted liquidation sale. We know that they have been trying to complete the purchase for a while. An effort last October fell through when Bain Capital backed out of financing it. So this is not a secure financial operator. The county must approve sales of certain oil assets, specifically that support offshore oil production that are onshore, to ensure they are fiscally sound and capable of safe operations in our county. But there is a loophole. We don't currently have this approval oversight of sales of onshore projects like this one. We should. This is a legacy of our past that was mostly offshore production. Ownership changes like this one occur with zero vetting and zero county oversight. We do know that Denver-based TerraCore is no Chevron. It has not so much as a website. A 2016 article in The Hill describes William McConaughey, the president, as perhaps the youngest member of the Koch network. This is concerning because the goal of the Koch network is radical deregulation. And right now, both federal and state regulators are not protecting us. The EPA is headed by an oil lobbyist and is being gutted. Dogger employees are invested in oil companies and taking shortcuts with cyclic steam injection permits specifically. The county needs to protect us, our health, our water, our climate. You can dress it up with solar panels and pretty words, but this is a risky, dangerous, and speculative project with Class 1, significant and unavoidable impacts that should be denied sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Ana Rosa Rizzo Centino, to be followed by Amanda Pantoja.
Good morning, Planning Commissioners. Here with Food and Water Watch, Food and Water Action, as well as on the board of SB and CLUE. I think at this point, no amount of solar is going to save this project. You should just deny it. And I think we need to replace it with solar, with wind, with clean energy. And unless you all are climate change deniers, we cannot approve any new oil projects, period. That's where we stand as an organization. So just wanted to put that out there. And it's important to alert the public ahead of time when public comment's going to happen. I just found out yesterday that public comment was going to be happening. That's why there's not more people here. Yeah, so you would have this whole place filled if people actually knew there was going to be public comment. So in the future, please give us more notice. Thank you.
Thank you. And Amanda Pantoja?
Hello, good morning. I'm Amanda. I'm with Food and Water Watch as well with Ana Rosa. And I also just want to echo some of the points that she stated up here. I don't believe that any amount of solar is going to make this project safe. It seems that this company already has acknowledged that solar is the solution to mitigate environmental issues that this project indefinitely will bring up to this community. So I suggest that that you all don't go through with this project and consider more sustainable projects such as complete solar energy and other sustainable sources of energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I understand we have 2 speakers in Santa Barbara. I don't have their slips, but I'm told that we do. Looks like, yes.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Brian Troutwine with the Environmental Defense Center, which represents the EDC, Sierra Club, and Santa Barbara County Action Network. And following me will be EDC Staff Attorney Tara Messing. Water is precious. We need to protect all of our water resources, including the groundwater in Cat Canyon. We cannot afford to inject millions of gallons of toxic pollution into our groundwater, and it would be wrong to saddle future generations with this problem. Injection operations can have devastating consequences. The recent spill of over 1 million gallons of crude oil and water in Kern County proves this. Dogger acknowledges that these kinds of spills can occur when steam is injected under pressure and breaks through the geological barriers to the surface. Cat Canyon is vastly more environmentally sensitive than the Simrick oil field in Kern County. And when a similar spill occurs in Cat Canyon, 88 rare species would be at risk. And the risk to people is also greater in Cat Canyon. The Kern spill occurred in a dry creek far from any town, but the town of Sisquoc, which is entirely reliant on groundwater, is located right along the banks of Cat Canyon Creek. The risk to our neighbors, to our water supply, and to the county's rich biological diversity is simply too great to gamble. It's also important to remember that Greca's Cat Canyon Lloyd Well number 17, an injection well, had a well casing failure in just 2015. The results aren't in yet, but the regional board is requiring groundwater monitoring to detect whether contamination entered into the community's underground drinking water supply. And the State Water Board concluded that water and beneficial uses were likely affected. According to OWEHA, parts of Cat Canyon are already ranked in the 100th percentile for groundwater threats and the 90th percentile for drinking water contaminants. And further, Cat Canyon is in the 97th percentile for impaired surface waters. Cat Canyon has some of the most threatened water in our state. The communities of Los Alamos and Sisquoc rely entirely on groundwater. Fresh water is a critical resource, and our economy depends on groundwater for drinking water and for agriculture. But both the Santa Maria and the San Antonio groundwater basins are declining. And a new study by Dr. Perrone at UCSB proves that people are drilling deeper and deeper wells into saltier aquifers as our shallower, higher quality groundwater resources are exhausted. So in conclusion, as new information comes to light, such as the massive spill caused by steaming in Kern County and Greca's recent well casing failure, and the studies showing communities relying on deeper aquifers as the shallower ones are depleted, the risks of steam operations in Cat Canyon become clear. The risks these projects pose to local groundwater supplies, to our local communities, and to our environment are simply too great, and we trust you to protect our community's well-being. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Missing?
Good morning, Chair Park and Commissioners. My name is Tara Messing, and I'm a staff attorney with the Environmental Defense Center. EDC, on behalf of our clients, oppose the West Cat Canyon Revitalization Plan project because this project will cause significant and irreparable damage to numerous acres of important sensitive habitat and native vegetation, endangered wildlife, our water quality, and public health. Oil and gas development using steam injection in Cat Canyon presents grave risks to our county's groundwater resources. As climate change continues to threaten the availability and quality of local water supplies, our county must protect groundwater resources as a valuable commodity that cannot be replaced or cleaned up if destroyed. Recent groundwater studies conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey found potential contamination from oil and gas operations in groundwater basins underlying multiple Southern California oil fields, including but not limited to the Orcutt and Oxnard oil fields. In the neighboring Orcutt field, the preliminary results released by USGS found mixing between oil field fluids and groundwater in 4 of the 16 wells sampled in the field. In the Oxnard oil field, thermogenic methane gas was found in at least 2 wells and possibly a third. Notably, USGS found that the groundwater wells with the highest thermogenic signals were located above cyclic steaming activity. Cat Canyon oil field is also ranked a high priority study area based on the field's high volume of injection. Existing sampling and information indicates that it is likely that oil field fluids and/or thermogenic gases will be detected in at least some groundwater wells in Cat Canyon oil field. During this time, it is important for the county to consider the upcoming USGS studies in Cat Canyon oil field. The Commission must take extra care in making decisions that will impact Santa Barbara County's vital freshwater resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Santa Barbara? No other public comment? Chairman Blau, I see you raising your hand. Did you? No. Okay. All right. Is there any further need for applicant presentation or rebuttal? And we'll close the public hearing.
And before I make the motion to drop this from the agenda, I'll just make one comment. It bothered me when I read the environmental review documents earlier about the 1,000 acres of solar. I think you need to correct that. When I did my little bit of research, 1,000 acre solar would generate enough electricity for 35,000 houses. So it's like, it was crazy, the number that's in there. So that being said, I'll make a motion that we drop this from today's agenda to be re-agendized when staff and applicant are ready.
Do I hear a second?
I will second with a comment, Mr. Chair. This request to drop matters from the agenda is procedural. It does not address the merits of the project. I think we always welcome public comment whenever there's an opportunity, but the decision today is not on the project or its merits. We look forward to having that opportunity in the future, but for now, I support the request.
We have any further deliberations by commission members? Mr. Villalobos, will you conduct the roll call vote?
Commissioner Bradley,
Yes.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
Aye.
Chair Park.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
We're going to take a quick break for 5 minutes. And Mr. Villalobos, will you duly note that Commissioner Freeney has arrived with the help of his son?
So noted. Would you like me to read the item, next
Yes,
item to the
please
record?
read item number 2 from our standard agenda into the record.
All right. The following is a hearing on the request of Yukon Group, agent for the applicant Sprint, to consider case number 18 CUP 35, application filed on November 15, 2018, and to determine the project is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to state CEQA guidelines sections 15303 and 15304.
Do we have any ex parte visits or disclosures to make from our planning commission members? Then let's go on to the staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Park. My name is Shannon Reese. Thank you for having me here today, and I will be presenting a conditional use permit for a new Sprint telecommunications facility at Bell Road in the New Cuyama area. This is a vicinity map for the project showing the proximity to Bell Road, which is the nearest public road, as well as Highway 166. The subject parcel is zoned Ag 2 100 and is surrounded by other agriculturally zoned parcels that primarily are used for cultivating row crops. And these pink dots here indicate the established scenic corridor along Highway 166. The project site is in the southeastern corner of the subject parcel, well outside of that corridor. Adjacent to the proposed site is existing agricultural development. And here's the zoomed in site plan. So essentially we have an equipment enclosure area, a new parking area, and the tower within that equipment enclosure area, as well as an easement for access and an easement for the utility route to an existing power pole. Here we have an elevation of the monopole that's proposed. It's 80 feet tall, and the equipment enclosure is made of concrete bricks and is 8 feet tall and completely conceals all the equipment within it. This is a before and after view looking toward the east on a private agricultural road that fronts this parcel. And so there's the proposal. All of the project elements would be painted in a medium gray color, which was reviewed by the North Board of Architectural Review. And here's the view looking west. The nearest public viewing area is along Bell Road, which is about 0.3 miles away from the site. This view is only a few hundred feet away. And the closest public viewing areas along Highway 166 are about a mile away from the project. And currently, Sprint has significant coverage gaps in this area. In their coverage study, they indicated that there was no service provided in this area. And this is the graphic showing coverage with the new facility. So essentially, coverage would be provided to constituents in Cuyama and New Cuyama, as well as travelers along this portion of the 166. So in summary, the proposed project would provide Sprint services in the region, would have radio frequency emissions well below the FCC limits for public exposure, and would meet all of the land use development code as well as comprehensive plan policies. And staff is recommending that the project be found exempt from CEQA pursuant to guideline sections 15303 and 304, which apply to new construction of small structures and minor alterations to land. Staff recommends that the Commission make the required findings for approval specified in Attachment A, determine that the project is exempt from CEQA, and approve the project subject to the conditions of approval. And that said, staff is available to answer any questions you may have. We also have a representative from the project here today. Mr. Ambrose from the Yukon Group is also available for questions.
Do any of the commission members have questions of Ms. Reese? Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. East.
Morning.
Just one clarification on the size of the antennas. In your staff report, you've indicated in a couple of places that they are 6 feet 4 inches, and there are 3 of them. But in the discussion of compliance in page 9, it refers to 3 8-foot tall panel antennas. And I just want the record to be consistent with the actual project plan.
Chair Park, Commissioner Cooney, the 6-foot 4-inch panel antennas, as discussed in the project description, are what's being proposed. The applicant made a minor change to the project previously, and so there is an attachment that references a 7-foot tall antenna, but the most current project description submitted by the applicant is what's included in page 4 of the staff report, 4 and 5.
So if we were to approve the project, that's what we'd be approving, the 6'4". I only asked this question not so much for the clerical issue, but because the size of the panels is what makes this project stand out from other cell sites we've approved recently.
Chair
Thank
Park, Commissioner Cooney, perhaps the project agent can provide further clarification for the record.
I would like that when the time is right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions by Planning Commission members of Ms. Reese? Well, then let's call on the applicant for any presentation the applicant wants to make.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Jerry Ambrose with Yukon Group here on behalf of Sprint. I don't have anything to add to staff's presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Staff is correct. The antenna size is, as stated in the report, the 6 feet 4 inches.
Do we have any questions of Planning Commission members for Mr. Ambrose? Commissioner Cooney?
Thank you, Mr. Ambrose. Always good to see you. I see you wear different hats representing different companies.
Wherever I'm asked to go, I go.
Yeah. The lighting of these sites is always a concern, as are, for me at least, the air conditioning of the generator if it's needed. I don't have a question about the generator given the location of the site in this instance, but as I read the lighting, it's for motion detection and when staff is on site. If no staff is on site, the lights go off after an hour.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a reason why they have to stay on for that long a time? Could it be shorter if it's basically a bird or a mammal that is triggering the light?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I do know they are motion sensitive, so if the tech were to come there, the lights come off of the cabinets and then they point down to where the workspace is. I'm not sure about the duration, if that can be reduced. I assume so. As long as the person's there, you only need light as long as the person's there, right? So I would have to be a follow-up question and answer I'd have to get for you.
Well, maybe it's not a concern if the light doesn't leave the immediate area and you're indicating the lighting is...
it's a down light, correct. It goes down.
Okay, that's
into the workspace in front of the cabinets. That's what it's for. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Ambrose? All right. Thank you, Mr. Ambrose.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any public comment? I don't see any speaker slips for this item. Correct? Okay. Then we don't need any rebuttal. We'll close the public hearing. Let's have deliberations by any Planning Commission members. Commissioner Cooney?
Mr. Chair, this is in the 1st District. Always a little jolted by that fact, but we'll take responsibility initially. this size of the installation is possible only, I think, because of its location. It is trying to cover a 2-mile radius, and that seems appropriate given the communities it's seeking to serve. And so all of my concerns that I would normally express about something in a much more populated area, I think are mitigated by its distance and isolation. So I'm prepared to support the request unless one of my fellow commissioners raises an issue I haven't thought of.
If that was a motion, this is a second.
I'll formally make the motion to approve staff's request as set forth on page 2 of our staff report dated today.
So I'll formally second it.
Very good. Well, as someone who spends probably a lot more time in that part of your district than you do, I can attest that that extra coverage is needed, and there's plenty of wide open spaces there to accommodate that view shed.
I have one question, and this is
Commissioner Briley.
total newbie thing. I've mildly watched cell sites in the Montecito area, so I appreciate what Mr. Cooney is saying. When there's something this high, I mean, that doesn't then set up any kind of a precedent in terms of them coming back for super great coverage at a different community that's more populated. I mean, because it's really just a function of the open space. I mean, this is quite high. So I'm, again, coming from the 2nd District, which is a little urban. So has that ever been discussed before on your previous cell site applications?
Well, I'll just say from my experience, we take in each one as an individual project, and they vary with the environmental constraints of that place. So I think you're absolutely right. It's going to differ depending on where it is. That's been my experience. And staff, would you like to answer that question?
Chair Park, Commissioner Bradley, we just concur with what Chair Park indicated. Each of these projects are taken on a case-by-case status and evaluated based on the merits of each of the projects, based on location and the development standards set forth in the ordinance.
Okay.
Well, I'll weigh in a little more directly. We don't allow them to be any higher than they have to be in order to serve the community. I mean, if it's, we err on the side of keeping them short.
All right. Any further deliberations on this motion? If not, Mr. Villalobos, will you conduct a roll call vote?
Commissioner Briley,
Yes?
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Blau,
All right.
Commissioner Freeney,
Aye.
Chair Park.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. And Mr. Villalobos, you read the 3rd item into the record.
Yes, thank you. The following is a hearing on the request of James Slott, agent for the Minton Company, owner to consider the following: 16 TPM 1, 16 DVP 9, and 16 CUP 17 applications filed on August 12, 2016, and to accept the addendum to the Orchid Community Plan Final Environmental Impact Report 95 EIR 1 pursuant to the state guidelines for implementation of the California Environmental Quality Act.
Right. Do we have any ex parte visits or site disclosures?
Mr. Chair, I'll be recusing myself from this issue, so everyone knows why. I'm one of the part owners of the property right next door to this project. So being within 300 feet, I'll need to recuse myself. Although I'm leaving the very capable hands of my 2 other partners, John Oil and Jerry Schmidt, and I'm sure they'll take good care of you, ask any questions where our project affects their project. I'll also tell you I'm involved, I can't say, financial development, Key Site 2, yes and no. We're sharing some common development costs. We're sharing an access point. So, I just need to leave the room.
Thank you. Beats jury duty, right?
What?
Okay, any other disclosures? I met with applicant agent yesterday about the project. We'll try. Okay. Then let's go on to the staff presentation.
Good morning, Chair Park and Commissioners. My name is Dana Eady, and I'm going to be giving the staff presentation today. The project that you have before you this morning is a new retail commercial shopping center located in Orchid. The project site is located on Clark Avenue. It's just south of Clark Avenue, and it's west of the Highway 101 and Clark Avenue intersection, and it's located in the Orchid Community Planning area. And there are 43 different key sites in the Orchid Community Planning area, which have been identified in the Orchid Community Plan for development. And these are sites, the sites are shown here on this slide, and the proposed project is actually located on a portion of Key Site 2, which is shown here. The area proposed for development is an approximately 6-acre area within Key Site 2. It's shown here where the star is located. Key Site 1 is located across Clark Avenue to the north, and Key Site 4 is directly to the west. And the other key sites that are in the area, such as Key Site 3 to the south, are zoned for residential development. Key Sites 1, 2, and 4 are all zoned for commercial development. So this map shows the portion of Key Site 2 which is proposed for development. The remaining area of the site is under separate ownership, and it's not proposed to be developed at this time. The project includes a new signalized intersection located at the preferred access point that's identified here per the community plan. It also includes a segment of the public multi-use trail, which goes across the site here, and then eventually will extend all the way down here. So this is an aerial view of the project site, and as I mentioned earlier, the site is just under 6 acres in size, and so this is the project site here. This is Key Site 4, and Key Site 4 is currently under construction with a new retail commercial shopping center. And then this is the remainder area here of Key Site 2 that's not proposed for development at this time. The project site is located just north of the Town and Country Mobile Home Park, which is located here. And then the Sunny Hills Mobile Home Park is located over here, and so that's the remainder area of Key Site 2 is north of that mobile home park. And as I mentioned in the other slides, Key Site 1 is located here, so there will be a new intersection that's located here that will ultimately be shared when Key Site 1 is developed in the future. So the project site is Zone C2, which is retail commercial, and the property to the south is zoned for mobile home park. It's a residential use. And then the other sites that are adjacent, like Key Site 4, are zoned for commercial as well. And so is Key Site 1 to the north. The project proposes to subdivide 5.95 acres into 4 parcels, and then to develop the site with new retail commercial uses, such as a grocery store, a restaurant with a drive-through, a new gas station with a convenience store and a car wash. There's also about 16,000 square feet of landscaping, the multi-use trail that I discussed previously, detention basin, and roadway improvements. There are 2 conditional use permits that are included with the application. One of those is to allow for the drive-through facility, and the second is for the mechanical car wash that's part of the gas station. And then there's an overall sign plan for the shopping center, which includes standards for wall signage, the menu boards for the drive-through, and then there are 2 freestanding monument signs that are also proposed. This is the tentative parcel map. As I mentioned before, the site's going to be developed into, or subdivided into 4 parcels. Lot 1 would be 2.27 acres, and that lot would contain the grocery store use in this building. Lot 2 is 0.79 acres, and that would include the restaurant with the drive-through. Lot 3 is 1.47 acres, and that would include a retail commercial building located here, as well as the detention basin. And then Lot 4 is 1.42 acres, and that would include the gas station, which has 12 fueling stations, and the convenience store, and then the car wash is here. The overall square footage of the project is 42,921 square feet. The building heights would be at or below the 35-foot height limitation for the C2 zone district. The project includes grading of approximately 2,500 cubic yards of cut and about 11,000 cubic yards of fill. And there are 184 parking spaces that are proposed for the project. And this is the site plan showing the locations of each of the new buildings that I mentioned previously. There are quite a few improvements to Clark Avenue that would occur for the project. This is the new signalized intersection here. And I do want to mention that this is showing a full build out of Clark Avenue as a result of full build out of all the key sites that are in that area. So key sites 1, 2, and 3. And so there is a new landscape median that is proposed along the length of the site, as well as a landscape median at the entry. 184 parking spaces. And the Public Works Department has reviewed the proposed design and the traffic circulation and has found it to be acceptable. The applicant is requesting a modification to the setback requirements for the rear yard setback along proposed lot 1, that's this area here. In the C2 zone, if a parcel backs up to another lot that is zoned for residential uses, the setback is 25 feet. Typically it is 10 feet, but it is increased to 25 feet. The applicant is requesting a modification to allow the setback to be 10 feet. Allowing the reduction in the setback would allow the applicant to limit pedestrian and vehicular access along this area of the site. So they're going to fully landscape it with trees and shrubs. They're also going to install an 8-foot tall CMU block wall all along the rear property line to buffer residents in the mobile home park from any noise resulting from use of the shopping center. Also, the loading areas for the grocery store would be here along the sides of the building. So there's one here and there's one over here. And rather than being in the rear of the building, which is typical. And having the loading areas on the side of the building is also consistent with development standards in the Orchid Community Plan, which recommend that for noise reduction purposes, because you're not exposing residents to the emissions and to the noise from idling vehicles and large trucks when they're loading and unloading in the shopping center. The Planning Commission, as the review authority, may modify the setback distances when they find that the modification is justified, and staff is recommending approval of the modification based on the design of the project. The project includes approximately 16,000 square feet of new landscaping, and that includes an average 35-foot wide landscape buffer, which is along Clark Avenue here, as well as landscape medians. And then there's also a 15-foot wide landscape buffer along the southwestern property line. And then, as I mentioned in the previous slide, this is the landscaping that's shown behind the grocery store. So you can see there's a mixture of trees and shrubs that are there. The Orchid Community Plan requires that the buffer area along Clark Avenue contain trees which will reach a height at maturity of 35 to 50 feet. And so the applicant has designed the landscaping plan with trees to meet that requirement. And they've also designed the landscaping in the median to comply with some specific Key Site 2 development standards that require trees to be spaced at a distance that's sufficient to provide a partial canopy over Clark Avenue when those trees are at maturity. And this is the proposed plant palette for the project. The landscaping is native and drought tolerant. It includes California sycamores, rosemary, lavender, fescue, and ceanothus, among others. And these are the project elevations for buildings 1 and 2. And these are for the grocery store and retail commercial uses. The building materials are semi-rural in character. They include reclaimed wood siding, galvanized metal green roofing, and natural rust finishes. And the design and colors are compatible with the approved retail commercial center that's being developed on Key Site 4, which is directly to the west of the site. So these slides are showing, the slide is showing buildings 3 and 4. The project has been conceptually reviewed at 2 meetings by the North Board of Architectural Review, and it is conditioned to require preliminary and final approval by the BAR prior to zoning clearance issuance for the development plan. And this slide is a rendering of proposed parcel 1. It's looking northeast and then southwest from the site. And the photo in the upper right-hand corner is an overall view of the shopping center. It's showing the new intersection and then the building locations as you're looking southwest from Clark Avenue. This is another rendering of the site, and this one's looking southwest from Clark Avenue at the proposed gas station and the restaurant building. The uppermost photo is a view of the site from Clark Avenue looking south. So this is a little hard to see on the larger screen, but this is the overall lighting plan. The blue dots are all of the parking lot pole lights. There's 22 of them. They are proposed to be 16 feet in height, and the fixture is shown here. And it's a dark sky compliant fixture that's fully shielded to direct light downward. There are also numerous lights that will be on the structures themselves, and those are shown in the green dots. So there's some here and here. Unfortunately, the outlines of the buildings aren't showing up so well here. But those fixtures are also shown here on this slide and are dark sky compliant fixtures. And one thing I did want to mention about the parking lot lights is that the project is conditioned to require that the lights be reduced to 80% at 10 o'clock p.m. The lights would be on a motion sensor, so if there was activity in the area after 10 p.m., the lights would gradually increase up to 100%, but then they would gradually decrease back to 80% when there was no longer any, cars driving in the area or things like that, or activity. So the project includes an application for an overall sign plan, and this slide shows the location of the proposed signage. There are 7 signs that are proposed on buildings 1 and 2. So there's 4 on building 1 and 3 on building 2. There are 4 on building 3. It's actually building 3 here. And then there's just 1 sign on building 4. There's 2 monument signs that are proposed. This one is to identify the gas station, and then this sign down here would be to identify the shopping center. So these slides just show the locations of the signs on buildings 1 and 2. The applicant is requesting a modification to the sign standards to allow for 2 additional wall signs to be added on to building 1, and then on the other building, just 1 additional sign is being requested. And the modification also includes a request to allow those signs to go up to 110 total square feet. The ordinance allows them at 100 square feet. So they're asking for each sign, to be just 10 square feet greater in area. And so in the case of this modification, the Planning Commission, as the review authority, may approve modifications to the sign standards based on a finding that the signage is architecturally harmonious in relation to the size and location of the structure and to the overall shopping center. And the signage was conceptually reviewed by the North Board of Architectural Review. They were supportive of the design, and so that does support the finding that's in the staff report that the signs are architecturally harmonious for the project. This is the proposed signage for buildings 3 and 4. And then these are the 2 freestanding identification signs or monument signs, as they're called. There is a modification that's being requested to the identification sign for the shopping center, and that's to allow it to contain multiple tenants within the shopping center rather than just one name of the shopping center. So it would be as they're showing here, where you would have just multiple tenants listed on the sign. The environmental review for this project consisted of the preparation of an addendum to the Orchid Community Plan Environmental Impact Report. The Orchid Community Plan analyzed the impacts resulting from 283,500 square feet of development on the entirety of Keysite 2. This project includes 42,921 square feet of retail commercial development, which is less than what was analyzed in the Orchid Community Plan EIR. There have been no substantial changes in circumstances on the site since the Orchid Community Plan EIR was certified, and there are no significant environmental effects that have been identified with the proposed project or an increase in the severity of any previously identified significant effects. Consistent with the analysis included in the Orchid Community Plan EIR, the development of Keysite 2 would result in significant and unavoidable impacts to visual resources and air quality, and that's due to the visual change in the area from a semi-rural to urban, as well as air emissions from additional traffic that's generated by full build-out of the project site. Class 2 impacts which can be mitigated to less than significant include impacts to biological resources, erosion during grading and construction activities, water use, wastewater, archaeological resources, and traffic and fire protection, and solid waste and noise, as well as any dust generated during construction. The Orchid Community Plan EIR identifies Class 1 significant and unavoidable cumulative impacts resulting from full build-out of the community plan, and that includes Keysite 2, in the areas of biological resources, air quality, water resources and solid waste, archaeological resources, traffic and circulation, schools, and visual resources and open space. Class 2 cumulative impacts were also identified, and those are shown here on the slide, and also include biological resources and transportation circulation. Mitigation measures to reduce or eliminate the identified impacts were developed from Orchid Community Plan policies, development standards, and mitigation measures. The recommended mitigation measures are included in the addendum, and they're also part of the conditions of approval for the project. When the Orchid Community Plan Environmental Impact Report was certified and the Orchid Community Plan approved, the Board of Supervisors did adopt a statement of overriding considerations for the identified Class 1 significant and unavoidable impacts that could not be fully mitigated. The proposed project is consistent with the Santa Barbara County Land Use and Development Code, provided that the modifications that are requested today are approved. And it is also consistent with the requirements for the C2 zone district and the Chapter 21 subdivision regulations, as well as the comprehensive plan, including the Orchid Community Plan. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission make the required findings for approval included as Attachment A of the staff report, including CEQA findings. Determine that as reflected in the CEQA findings, that after considering the environmental review documents, no subsequent environmental impact report shall be prepared for the project. To approve case number 16 TPM1, subject to the conditions included in the staff report. To approve case number 16 DVP9, including a modification to the setback requirements, subject to the conditions in the staff report. And then approve the 2 conditional use permits for the drive-through fast food restaurant on parcel 2 and the mechanical car wash on parcel 4, as well as the overall sign plan, including the modification that was discussed today to the number and size of the wall signs and to the design of the freestanding sign. And that's also subject to the conditions in the staff report. So thank you. That concludes staff's presentation. I did want to mention that the applicant's team is here. We also have Will Robertson from Public Works that is here to answer any questions regarding the traffic circulation. I think that's it. Thank you.
Great. Do we have questions from the Planning Commission of Ms. Eady?
Yeah, I have a couple.
Commissioner Farini?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Edie. Good presentation.
Thank you.
One was the setback modification from 25 to 10. So what goes on back there? The wall is going to go on the property line?
Yes.
And then landscaping next to the building or next to the wall or in that whole 10 feet?
Chair Park and Commissioner Farini, let me bring up the site plan again, and then I'll just point that out for you. Just go back to that. You can kind of see it there. Let's see. Find a good one here. Okay, so actually here you can see, so this is the rear of the grocery store. So you can see there's going to be trees that are planted all along here and shrubs. And then there will be a new CMU block wall that's constructed at the property line. So you'll have the block wall, then you'll have landscaping, and then you'll have the building.
So the 10-foot is not accessible?
That's correct. There's not going to be a gate or anything blocking anyone from walking back there, but there wouldn't be any reason for anyone to go back there. There's not going to be any drive aisles or sidewalks or anything like that. It's literally just going to be landscaping between the building, and then the wall.
And then, so with the fire department, they're good with not having access to the back of the building?
The fire department has reviewed the project and has not stated that they have any issues with that design.
Okay, and is there any lighting placed on the back of the building?
Not along the back of the building. The closest light to it, and I can show you where that is as well on this. So this is a little hard to see, but so this is the rear of the building here. There's a light on the wall or on the side of the building here, and then this is a parking lot light that's over here because there's parking in this area right here.
Right, but that's not in the setback area.
That's correct. There's no lighting in the setback area.
Okay. All right, very good. And then on the sign modifications, can you go back to your rendering of those?
Yes.
And so the additional signs, can you point to those?
Yes. So the two additional signs would be this sign here and this sign here.
Okay, and then the total square footage of signs, the cumulative for that as that they're asking for in the sign modification
So the
would be
addition.
the square footage of the two signs plus the additional square footage of the main sign, or what's the math there?
So what they're asking for is this sign, which is 110 square feet, and this sign, which is 110 square feet. So 220 square feet. But one thing I wanted to mention is the sign ordinance allows these types of signs to go up to 100 square feet. So really, the additional square footage is only 10 square feet more than what the sign ordinance allows.
Okay, that helps. So the sign could be there at 100. We're just approving 10 feet extra for each sign, or 10%,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes, and you're
Yeah.
also allowing for those two additional signs because the sign ordinance really only allows for one wall sign on this frontage of the building and one wall sign on this frontage of the building. So what you're allowing for is to have two additional signs and then to increase those by 10 square feet each.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Commissioner Bradley?
I had a question about the open space trail easement. Can you go to a slide that shows that? Is that just along the kind of entry drive? So can you point to where
So-
exactly that is? Oh, that's the dark area?
Yes, Chair Park Commissioner Bradley, this is the proposed trail. It's proposed to be decomposed granite at 8 feet in width.
Okay, and that's per the Orchid Community Plan that was envisioned there.
Yes.
And then another question is on the landscape stats. They take credit for that because it's on their site. Do they also get credit for the landscaping on the Clark Avenue medians as part of their on-site landscape percentage?
That is included in the 16,000 square feet.
Okay. Okay, and then another question has to do with just the traffic circulation. I understand this is, I love the fact that we're jumping off the Orchid Community Plan and the final EIR. When I was doing my quick site visit, the Clark Avenue 101 turns were a little bit tight, and I see in the documents that you have an LOS at EF projection at Clark 101. So with this application, that's going to stay within what the Orchid Community Plan FEIR projected, right? And there's no other kinds of findings we would have to make because it's below LOSC, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I think that it may help also to have Will Robertson comment on that. I know that Caltrans does have some plans to make improvements to the Highway 101 Clark Avenue interchange, and some of that would also be driven by Key Site 1, which is to the north. So when that site builds out, then those additional improvements to that intersection would be needed.
Okay. Yeah, because I have a feeling it'll get more crowded, that's all. And then I do have another question about just the CEQA, and I'm sorry, I'm new, I'm kind of getting my feet wet here, but because the Orchid Community Plan FEIR was certified, then we don't is there an allowance to fuss with any of the mitigation measures verbatim? In other words, you have those mitigation measures that come out, they're transferred to the key sites, and I see that the applicant has requested some adjustments to that. Is that at the commission's discretion, or how do we treat that?
Chair Park and Commissioner Bridley, there are minor clarifications that can be made to those.
Okay.
And we do make minor clarifications to them just to make them consistent with our current zoning requirements as well, like stating that a zoning clearance is required and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Bridley, there's nothing wrong with asking lots of questions about different materials. And if you have any doubts about that, you should watch videos of former Commissioner Brown, and you'll realize there is no reason to apologize for asking lots of questions.
I want to have everyone note that I'm using the Post-its. I don't know that I can keep up with her record, but I will have questions.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
Commissioner Cooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Edie, I have questions that I think you'll have to refer to the applicant, but in general, do you have an idea of the circulation for the proposed drive-through portion of the restaurant?
Yes, Chair Park and Commissioner Cooney. The drive-through is located here. Stacking, it's been designed to allow for stacking of 10 cars within the drive-through. And then also what's very important is to look at where the ordering menu boards will be placed versus the pickup for the drive-through, because what we need to make sure that's avoided are cars that are obviously stacking out here and blocking the roadway. So a lot of thought went into that, and they worked directly with Public Works on that design.
Okay, so the entrance to the drive-through would be the portion closest to the new entrance. Is that correct? Goes from the right side around to the left side.
That's correct.
Okay, I got a different impression from the drawings in the sign ordinance, but they were looking for something else, I guess. So stacking is an issue, and I'll be interested in hearing the applicant explain what happens when at noontime there are construction crews lining up for their lunch, and where that overflow is going to go. We have a recent example in Santa Barbara where the drive-through spills out onto State Street and is causing significant traffic problems there. So that's a concern to me. Overall, I have other concerns about a drive-through. I don't think I've ever voted in favor of one, but we can cover those issues once I understand about the stacking.
Ms. Edie, I have some questions. On the setback modification, going to a 10-foot setback in the rear means, of course, there can be no loading docks there ever, right? won't fit.
Chair Park, that's correct.
And the loading docks are all on the side. So by moving the building closer to the mobile home park, we're actually giving them more privacy because they don't have loading docks in the rear that they have to listen to, correct?
That's correct.
That's a positive thing, I think, for the community, if I understand it correctly. Okay, I'm guessing that for you as a planner and for the applicant, that working with a 22-year-old community plan has been challenging. I don't need you to respond to that, but I'm guessing that it would be. And I have a question about traffic circulation here. I realize that the staff report recommends approval, and the applicant simply wants to go forward with the project and get it built. So maybe my questions are more rhetorical than they're not designed to hang up the project. But I look at this and I see a lot of asphalt on this land that comes from parking lots, but also that great big curving road through there. The road, why isn't it along the left, I mean the east boundary of the property? Isn't there going to be a road there anyway?
Thank you, Commissioner Park, for the question. So I think there are a couple of items at play here that I want to just talk about. So
Sure.
This intersection location was identified in the Orchid Community Plan as the preferred intersection alignment. The reason is that it needs to line up with Key Site 1 to the north, which is Zone C2 and has the potential to have quite a bit of retail commercial development there.
But there's no road there now, is there, out of Key Site 1?
No,
And
but
that's a blank parcel, and this looks like, okay, that's theoretically where the intersection should be, but it's not like we're matching up with an existing road, right?
correct.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry
So,
for interrupting.
The Orchid Community Plan requires that the developers of Key Sites 1 and 2 work together to come up with an intersection alignment that's at the preferred access point that works for both projects. And so that's really where this came from. So they worked with Key Site 1. There is an application on Key Site 1 we're currently reviewing. I also wanted to mention there is an existing roadway that is located here that goes down to the Sunny Hills Mobile Home Park. That road is proposed to, at this point, remain open. It will be changed to being a right turn in and right turn out only. So this will be the primary intersection and primary entrance to the site. So when you come into the site, you'll come down here, it tees into the existing roadway to Sunny Hills, and then you can make a right turn and go down into that mobile home park. Overall, for build out of the Orchid Community Plan, Key Site 3 is located to the south of this site, and the Orchid Community Plan anticipates that if a project on Key Site 3 is approved, it would also tie into this intersection. And so that's the main reason why there are so many lanes and it's as wide as it is because it was designed for full build out of Key Site 3 as well. So I don't know, hopefully that helps to answer some of the questions about why it's lined up that way.
It does, and I think you're basically constrained by the community plan, but I think there will be a day in the future where we will rue committing so much space to cars, and we'll think that we should have done it more efficiently. And I think if anybody ever is a pedestrian, is in an accident crossing that curved roadway from these developments, we'll rue that as well. But I don't want to hang things up. So that's my questions, and thank you for answering them. Okay, let's go on to our applicant presentation.
Yes, still good morning. Good morning, Chair Park, fellow commissioners. My name's Gavin Moores. I am speaking on behalf with Jim Slott and Michael O'Flynn, also fellow applicants. And then we have our team for us who can answer questions from Commissioner Cooney on traffic. We have Scott Shell from ATE, as well as Paul PA, and Kevin Small, along with Brandon Hevener from Bethel Civil Engineers as well.
I should disclose before you get started that I suggested that you folks hold your comments to 20 minutes with 10 minutes for rebuttal, and you divide up your 20 minutes as you see fit among your speakers.
Sure, of course. Thank you. First of all, it's great to be speaking in front of you, and I'm sure you're pleased to be listening something about different than cannabis ordinances or oil. This is something where you can cut your teeth into, and I appreciate your input and your feedback as well. I would like to start out, really, first of all, by talking about what we're going to review today. We're going to talk about what we've proposed to build and where others have failed, because there have been four. We are the fourth project on this site. Key obstacles we've overcome, the connectivity between key sites 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then advantages of the project. We've got circulation to discuss as well with inside our portion of Key Site 2. And our request today is that we will give you some guidance. I think it's always nice to start out with the end in mind. We'd like to find approval for the environmental document and its findings. We would like to approve the Orcutt Gateway Plaza project, accept the conditions of approval modifications submitted in the letter that was sent in last night, and help us with the phased plan for construction of the intersection. We also want to utilise your expertise to provide a clear path to the other departments, so as we go through our construction documents, the intersection is designed in a way that is not prohibitive to operations, not prohibitive to the construction sequence, etc. Lastly, I would ask that in these conditions of approval, we look at that, make sure that Key Site 2 and second project into a development like this, where a number of project sites are all convening on one location, that we're not overburdened with the costs for that complete intersection, in addition to the fees, etc. I would start by saying I have to congratulate. It's been a great experience working with Edie. She's always kept us on task, kept us focused, and to the vision of getting to a hearing. And also, thanks for the coordination and the efforts of Will Robertson. It's been a long journey. We have been 4 years in the process here, working this through. And I must have to say, I think that one of the reasons is that a lot of others have come in before us. These are some of the projects that have been planned, that have not gone forwards. This is us. I know it's kind of a cheesy name, Mojo Partners, but collectively we've been working on that project now and the design since just before 2015 internally, and then with the county from 2015 on. I think we've addressed all the concerns that have been laid out in front. There is a lot of asphalt. I agree with Chair Park's comments there. And when you take into consideration collectively all of the other projects and key sites that could potentially feed into there, the max build-out design, I can understand where it is, but I think there's been a number of areas in this where we've had to focus on the intersection first as being the most critical component, and the coordination with other property owners to get to where we are. One of the concerns, Chair Park was correct in his analysis. Originally, our earlier site design did include a loading dock on the back when we were looking about connecting to Ashbrook. That has now since obviously been changed because it made more sense to provide the loading dock on the side and was a recommendation from Air Pollution Control District, etc. So let's talk about the intersection layout. This is an interesting path. This is the exact exhibit from the OCP, and there is the preferred access. And it's been a challenging process to get to this point, to align owners, align designs, align plans, and have that all fit in the box, neatly tied up with the bow of the traffic circulation and the designs. We've had numerous meetings. We actually have 9 traffic studies. I won't tell you how many site plans, but all of this is culminated through the process, which we have to respect, and I agree with, of Public Works and Planning and Development, of acceptance of the geometry and the layout on the intersection. This is probably one of the more important areas I'd like to talk about today, and we touched on it yesterday in some conversations with Dana, is that the extent to which each project is responsible and the cumulative effects of each project and those effects that need to be installed and a sequence of which they are to be installed is probably the most critical point of this entire project. Key Site 2, our portion of Key Site 2 is the second smallest component of this project, and the other key sites that are feeding into it. And obviously our primary concern is just making sure that we pay for what we mitigate for the impacts that we create, not necessarily bear all the costs of other impacts from other key sites. Here's the design of the intersection. It's blown up a little bit more, and what I've done here is you can see by these turquoise lines where we are proposing, just for our internal thoughts, not with any formal review with Will or anything, the first, what I would call the first phase of the design of this, of rechanging or realignments that need to go on to make this project work within the Clark Avenue layout. You'll see that what we are not doing, we are not proposing any work on the Quayside 1 portion, recognizing that that is something that may change as they move through their process as well, but limiting the scope of work to what we have our own inherent control over. This is actually at the southern end of where Quayside, our portion of Quayside 2 comes down to join the Sunny Hills Road. Is that the red button there? Okay. So that would be, we would come down just in here, and this is the existing Sunny Hills Road connection there. So where we, and depending on the time of Mr. Simonian's project, who's presently, who I met with this morning, it would depend on the timing of the completion of the road where we come and complete all the way down to here. Initially, our thoughts were if there was going to be a significant delay, we would terminate the road here, but obviously with a tighter timeline, it would make more benefit to bring the road down to here, but we want to avoid this being a parking and gathering area for a number of months that could happen if that road was not fully open all the way through. This is the final site plan at Max Build-Out that you saw in the previous slides there, and what we've done is this is our SketchUp that Bethel Engineers worked on yesterday in coordination with AT Traffic Engineers as to the improvements that we would need to put in to start with the two-lane signal intersection on the east and west side, and then with the right turn in and right turn out lanes. I'll let Paul Poirier and Scott Shell handle those in more detail later on. I think it's, as I mentioned before, it has been a challenge getting to this point with the agreement of all the owners and making sure that we comply with all the conditions that we're required to comply with, but this is it. We are here. In an ideal world, yes, may have been nice to relocate it somewhere else, but I think that given the proposed site layouts of Quayside 1, this is the best alignment that we're going to get at this point in time. So we're requesting your support and approval of these designs. And I can't emphasize, at some time it's felt like that we have been building a project around an intersection, which we are, because I recognize the importance of traffic circulation, and I will end with bringing some forefront to the actual project itself, which is really that benefits some of the residents by providing local stores and amenities. This is just another section of the slide that shows you the view further back, where you're able to see the number of traffic turning lanes coming in at Max Build-Out, and we can explain later on that what we will be constructing is up to this second lane here. Project advantages, I think most importantly, it'll be nice to have a grocery store at this end of Clark Avenue. A number of people are having to drive down further down to Bradley at this point in time for grocery stores, and I think it's a great opportunity to provide that type of service to local residents. More importantly, I think the OCP documentation supports and was prepared for a project just such as this, and I recognise that being the first applicant in at this intersection, the challenges that it does bring. I think with that in mind, we've taken steps to ensure that we're compatible with Quayside 4 projects, and I must say, it's been refreshing to work with adjacent property owners who are willing to share each other's access points to make the circulation within both of our projects that much better. We do have, and preliminary, obviously, I think a conceptual North Bar review approval, which is great, and it's been favourably received. We do have the support of lead departments as well, and followed our path through the entire discretionary process. I think that it's important to recognise, obviously, that this is the first project that will commence the construction of this intersection of Clark, which will change it for the long term, and it will change it to the vision that it was meant to be. And I think it will improve traffic circulation coming off 101, certainly for those heading south as well as north. obviously it's going to generate tax revenue, we know that, and I think that that is an item that is easily said and can sometimes be overlooked. Circulation within the quaysite, we just highlighted these with the orange arrows to have them stand out and to be more visible. But you can see in there the connectivity between 4 and 2, and then obviously 1 and 2, and then between us, which will lead out to the remainder portion of Quaysite 2, and then the proposed, or if there is a future development down in Quaysite 3. I'll end with this area. This is one of the computer renditions that we have of the shopping centre and the grocery store, because at the end of the day, it's not just about circulation, it is about providing amenities for local community members and residents that live there, and I think this will certainly be one of the advantages. I understand Commissioner Cooney's concerns on State Street. I know that establishment. I drive down that road. One of the points I would say, I'll let the professionals provide you with your answers. There are a lot more drive-through options up in North County area, and I think that the traffic demand, we do actually have 11 parking spaces to be stacked in that drive-through, and we do have a restriction on use on that drive-through by the actual title, and so we are restricted from burger use. So there won't be any burger establishments at that particular drive-through. That's it. Thank you. I will yield the time for our consultants and to answer other questions.
All right. So who's next up to bat?
So we have the full design team here to answer questions for you. Kevin Small, the landscape architect, is here. We have Scott Shell from ATE regarding transportation questions. Brandon Heavener from Bethel's here, talk about civil engineering and grading. But I want to take the balance of our time to answer a couple of your questions. You're very astute, Chair Park, in looking at why we moved and are asking for the 10-foot setback in the back, and we've eliminated all of the activity back there because we figured we'd be a better neighbor. And if we actually did comply with a 25-foot setback and landscape that, we think it'll actually create a nuisance back there, where it'll be an area where nobody can see what's going on. We'll have to see what happens as we build the project, whether or not we are going to have to fence that off to make sure it doesn't become an area where bad things are happening. But overall, we're looking to create something that's nice for the people in the mobile home park, that is landscaped, and that they're going to see after they look over their 8-foot block wall that'll be separating them from us. Regarding the intensity of the development on this site, just to take note that if we took the pro rata share of the square footage that was approved for Quaysite 2, which was 283,500 square feet, and took about a third of it, we're about a third of the total Quaysite 2 area, we're at less than 50% of the proposed development for the original Orchid Community Plan. We don't believe that anything at that intensity would be commercially viable on the site, but perhaps the square footage in the original OCP was overstated to make sure that the environmental impacts were covered by that environmental impact report that was done at the time. And just to note, the size of the intersection and the traffic volumes going through the intersection are using full OCP build-out square footages. So I believe that they would be considered overstated for reality, as all of the projects for the remainder of Quaysite 2, whatever the heck happens at Quaysite 1, whatever happens with the real Quaysite 3 down the road, those numbers will probably not be at the max build-out, very optimistic numbers that were used in the original OCP and that are currently used in the traffic studies that generated the geometry for full build-out that we're showing on our site. So really the study of what the intersection could be is to define how much property will be dedicated to the county for future street widening, additional lanes, and that sort of thing. Regarding the signage, we are courting a grocery store as our preferred use for the large tenant building. And having done a number of Scolari's markets and other grocery stores, they like to have descriptors. So if you looked at the Scolari's market that used to be in San Luis Obispo, Marsh and Johnson, or the one that was in Paso Robles on 22nd and the Main Street there, or the Vons that we did at Fairview Shopping Center, all of those have 4 descriptors as part of the overall signage in addition to the big main store sign. So it's just kind of something that the major tenants are expecting to have to sign the lease. So we're trying to make it, that's why we're asking for the exception for the additional signs, is to make it attractive for a grocery store so that we can get that kind of a user to come in to serve the community. Regarding the circulation at the drive-through, that Chick-fil-A on Upper State is a nightmare. Only has 5-car queuing. We have actually 11-car queuing, and we have room for 3 more cars to queue without interrupting traffic if they stay to the right curb line where the drive-through is on that drive lane. So we don't anticipate having any problems with the drive-through there. We looked at Google Earth while you were asking other questions to see how many cars can queue over there at the Chick-fil-A, and it was only 5. So if we had 11 cars at Chick-fil-A in Santa Barbara, 6 of them will be out on the street currently like they do have. The reason that the preferred intersection location for the signalized intersection is where it is to create distance between the US 101 and Clark Avenue intersection. So they're trying to push it as far west as feasible to serve Key Site 2, Key Site 3, Key Site 4, and Key Site 1 at the same time without pushing it all the way over to Stillwell, because they didn't want Stillwell to be a major intersection, and there's a neighborhood to the north of Clark at Stillwell that would be impacted by a major signalized intersection there. And then we worked really close with Key Site 4. They have an entitled plan that is under construction. We aligned the east-west main driveway that goes in front of the store with Key Site 4 so that there'll be almost the appearance that it's a single development between the 2 parcels. And Key Site 4 also coordinated with us in terms of relocating the main access point to Clark so that we could have our trucks not go behind our building, but pull into the site, back into our loading docks on the east side of the building, and then pull straight out in a straight movement out to Clark Avenue. Previously, they had been straddling the property line and were at a grade that was much higher than our base finish floor for the grocery store because it spans such a way. So this way we can put it down on our benched lot and continue it out. And they've been coordinating with us and have agreements in place to agree to relocate that onto our part of the parcel so that we can both use that and it works better for both parcels. That's all I have. If you have any other questions, the whole design team is here to talk to you. Thank you.
Do we have any questions of the applicant's design team from Planning Commission members at this time? If not, then let's go on to our public comment. Do we have any speaker slips on this item? Yes. We have 2, and so we have David Hassett and then Ed Simonian. David, are you here?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I represent Sunny Hills, the mobile home park, and also we help oversee Town and Country, which is another mobile home park. We're both senior citizen mobile home park. And one of the requests that's been brought up from us is to add Sunny Hills Park Lane to the left-hand turning lane at that intersection. Right now it's posed, I guess, we can only make right-hand turns out, and figure we're all senior citizens for the drive out. To make a right to go to shopping would be really difficult, so it is important for us to be able to make a left off of the existing road that we have to exit Sunny Hills to be able to go to that intersection and make a left-hand turn to go to the shopping and stuff.
You know, excuse me, can we go to the site plan so we can see what Mr. Hassett's referring to?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So somewhere it shows our street on the side. That looks pretty good right there. On the far right hand side is our road exiting Sunny Hills at this time. And to the bottom left is where we'd actually turn left to head up toward the intersection. So right now, proposed for us to only be able to make a right-hand turn if that is closed off, but hopefully we can also continue the road across our road because the Keysite 3's another project that is going to be pretty much going down our Sunny Hills Road, following our fence line as of now, and then going along the freeway side of our park.
You know, I'm sorry, I'm still not understanding where you want the left-hand turn.
Okay, so the at the end, all the way up to Clark Avenue,
Yeah.
right now we can make a left to go to shopping or whatever. Once this project starts, they're going to only make our street go out and only turn right. So there's no way for us to go down to Orchid.
Oh, I see, to make a left-hand turn off of Sunny Hills towards Orchid, you wouldn't be able to do
Right,
that.
won't be able to do that
Got it.
in the future unless we do be able to tie into this area. But there's multiple concerns with our tenants is Keysite 3. I know this is adding on to more, but there's also more traffic that's going to be tying into that lower left-hand corner there. So we'd like to add, for future talks, the street to go across the other Keysite 2 project, the one in front of Sunny Hills, to tie into Keysite 3. And then maybe we can have a three-way stop sign right there where the existing Sunny Hills Road is and the one that's going to be crossing over. And this way we can control traffic right there. So this way everything's just help on the flow. But we do have over 400 units between the two parks that is really looking forward to this project. So we're excited because we'll have our shopping, we'll be able to walk, gas station, everything right now is, you have to go all the way into Orchid to, to go shopping and everything else. So we're happy about the project. We just want to make sure that there's a few things that just.
So, Mr. Hassett, so
Yes.
you're proposing like a three-way stop here?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. And then also the name, because once that happens, our that road will no longer exist. We have a sign right now that says Sunny Hills. We'd like to make sure that when we turn left, that our Sunny Hills lane would be on the turning lane for the road street name.
Okay.
So people know where we're
And,
at.
and then we'll bring Public Works up to talk about this
Yeah.
Clark Road intersection.
figure all that
So,
out, yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Hassett, I actually have a question for you.
Sure.
And I was pleased to hear you say that you got 400 tenants. They're looking forward to this project, so it'll give
Looking
them
forward to it,
needed
yes.
grocery service right there.
Yes.
And you mentioned that some will walk there.
Yes.
So here's my question. Please take that out of the hearing room immediately. The phone, please. Is there anything that can be done to, I'm not putting that right. Are you satisfied that this gives you the maximum pedestrian access from your tenants?
They provide all the pedestrian, which is awesome. We would probably have to figure out some way from our park down to that three-way stop sign that I'm proposing, that maybe we can all work together with the three property owners to tie in from our park, a sidewalk or whatever, to that bottom corner. Then there's Keysite 3, property owner for Keysite 2 on the east side. We can all sort of hopefully work together to make it where everything flows well with pedestrians.
But you're satisfied that this applicant and our staff have worked out as much pedestrian access as
Oh, absolutely.
can
Looks
work
really-
for your folks?
Looks really good. Looks
That's
great.
great. Glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hassett. Mr. Simonian, are you here? Yes. Ed Simonian?
Commissioner Park, Commissioners, I'm Ed Simonian, and I represent Meridand LLC, which is the adjacent portion to the east of Keysite 2. We are still part of Keysite 2, and I'm here for a little clarification on what's happening with the road.
Thank
Presently,
you.
the Sunny Hills Mobile Home Road accesses through our property and continues with a servient easement along the back end and along the Sunny Hills Mobile Home fence. We're in the process, and I have been, unfortunately, in a long process with a road engineer in Los Angeles taking care of the access point down here, which would be the access from the signalized intersection on Clark through the first portion of Key Site 2 across our portion to give access to Key Site 3. We would therefore be looking to abandon the present servient easement and grant a road connecting this road to continue access for Key Site 3. So it would be something that would be less of a freeway and a right turn and a left turn, and it would be more of a direct line across our property to the back to Key Site 3, which would be servient basically to the intersection as well as to Key Site 3, and we will remain with our access off of our property on to Clark Avenue from where it presently is on Sunny Hills Road. Unfortunately, I've been working for a few months, almost a year, with the people, and we've had to do a topographical survey and a few other things, and I just presented it to Mr. Robertson, and we still have some work to do on the intersection itself, but at that time, I plan to work with him again and see if we can't get something granted that will make this all accessible and presently ready for development when Key Site 3 comes in and Key Site 2's portion come in. We have been in process of trying to get a couple of different tenants, and both of those have fallen through. I'm still in talks with a few other people, but as of now, we don't have anything either to present to the commission or to present to staff for a development there. But you should know where we are in terms of the road and the access for Key Site 3 and what we are planning to propose as soon as we get it finished.
Mr. Simonian, so Key Site 3 is where in relation
It's
to your
behind,
parcel?
it is to the north of Sunny Hills, behind the Sunny Hills Mobile Home Park, along Highway 101.
Okay.
So if you're looking, I'm sorry, south of Sunny Hills.
Yeah.
So, all right, you see where we are, if you look up at 2, and then there's a blank spot and you see a 3, that is 3. So presently, you have, or I should say, Sunny Hills, Key Site 3 has access via a servient easement along the, what looks like the red property line between Sunny Hills and Key Site 2. There is a servient easement along our property. That would create a right-hand turn, where it would dead end into the Sunny Hills Road, down almost to Sunny Hills, and a left-hand turn across the Sunny Hills fence line, and then back right to Key Site 3. We're proposing a road that would eliminate that right-hand and left-hand turn and would bisect our property across Key Site 2, leaving us 2 portions of the property and access along Highway 101 back to Key Site 3. So it would alleviate the need for a 3-way. It would make it an easier traffic flow 4-way, and I think that I have spoken to Mr. Robertson about that, and I think that's where the county is looking for, and we're trying to accommodate that. I've just had a little bit of difficulty with my road engineers taking care of this project.
Mr. Simonian, what you're describing, it will connect to what, to me now, looks like that curved road to nowhere?
Correct. That's exactly what it would be, because we do not have left-right access onto the property from Sunny Hills. Presently, it's proposed right in and right out. As it is now, there is left in and left out, but our access to the property, as proposed in the Orchid Community Plan, was to be through the other portion of Key Site 2, leaving us only the right in, right out on Sunny Hills. So just some clarification as to where we are in terms of what's going on with the road alignment and what we are trying to put together to propose. We're not in a position at this point to give any sort of project to staff in terms of what we plan with the development. Unfortunately, a couple of things have fallen through for us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Simonian. Any other commission members have questions of Mr. Simonian?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Looks like the answer is no, so thank you. And we appear to have no other public comment. Is that correct? We have a new one? Oh, I'm sorry. So we have 2 more. First, we'll have Judy Birch. Judy, are you here? To be followed by Ernest.
Good morning. I saw in one of the pieces of paper on the table there, talking about the cleaning of the parking lot hours. They have asked, instead of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., to increase the hours for cleaning to 6 a.m. to midnight. And this is, after all, 55 plus mobile home parks right there. So, you know, people go to bed around 9 or earlier even. So I'm wondering what you've decided on that, or has there been a decision made?
Well, I don't think so, and I think, can we have staff or the applicant respond to this point?
It's both a little early and a little late to be making noise out there, I think. That's all I have.
No, in fact, let's wait until we have finished public comment, then we'll have you respond to this. Thank you, Ms. Birch.
Okay.
It's a good point. We'll address it. And Ernest, are you here, Ernest?
Good morning.
Ernest, could you start by giving us your last name, too?
Sure.
Thanks.
Ernest Lintz.
Lintz, okay.
I talked about this situation once before when we were talking about the building of an 8-foot wall, and I was happy to hear that the gentleman was willing to do that. My concern is if you're going to run a road right by our fence, then you're endangering the seniors who live there. It's very easy to stop a car, jump over the fence, which we now have a 6-foot fence. Some of it isn't even very good built. And the seniors here, most of them are somewhat are hurt. You know, they're sick. And you're talking about a road that goes by right our fence, and midnight, whatever. So I think that you should consider very strongly the continuation, at least, of that 8-foot wall that you started, which I've asked for before, and we were granted that 8-foot wall. Even though I don't live in that park, I was worried about those seniors also, because you were just going to build some woods there, which would make it really bad news. So I think that you should really seriously consider the security of these seniors. The other thing I'm worried about is when you're coming on that road that comes in and goes along the 8-foot wall, you also have, I don't know exactly now what our entrance is to the park. You're going to have people going the wrong way and going right through our park. Now we got people walking with walkers, and again, it really endangers the senior citizens. They take walks in the evening, they take walks sometimes even later on at night. It depends. So I think you should consider it. And I really think, I would think that the city would demand that we have security for our seniors. The only other question I have is, it's not in opposition, but I don't understand why we have to have another shopping center, because we have the very large Albertson, which is a grocery store, and we have 2 gas stations right next door to each other. So that's the only question I have. But seriously, the one thing that I would almost demand here is that you consider the wall to be a continuation for the security of the seniors. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lentz, stay up there for a moment. I hear you, but I don't understand what part you're talking about.
Okay.
Could somebody point to that or help Mr. Lentz out with the pointer? So
Yeah,
know
would you
what we're all
please?
talking about? Thank you, Ms. Edie.
Yeah. Chair Park, so the area that Mr. Lintz is referring to is actually the continuation of the road that would go across the other portion of Key Site 2 down to where it would tie into Key Site 3. So it doesn't apply to this current project. It would apply to like the build, if we received additional development applications for the build out of the remainder of Key Site 2, where that road was going. I can pull up a site plan here and show
So
you.
on the site plan we were just looking at, it's not even on that.
It's not on that.
Okay.
So it's actually here. So it would be, so the road comes in through here, goes down here, and then it would go along here. As it currently is, there's an easement that goes along here and then ties in down here. Mr. Simonian was talking about that potentially when this area is developed in the future, that alignment might change. But we haven't received any development applications at this time for, at least in planning and development, for developing that remainder area.
Okay, great, thank you.
The reason I mentioned it, ladies and gentlemen, is because I did hear the gentleman say that they are planning to have a road going along our fence, and that concerned me very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, where are we? Well, let's see if the applicant and staff can answer Ms. Birch's question about the hours of cleanup. That'll be part of your rebuttal.
Chair Park, fellow commissioners, one of the items that we took into consideration is moving parking areas further away from the mobile home parks that we did in the revised design, or the design that you have right now. So there would be no cleaning that would be required in that area that is right adjacent to the mobile home parks. Now the other thing is that if we are cleaning the parking lot, we have to clean the parking lot. Obviously, it makes sense when there are no cars there. But I would say that you have substantial buildings that would screen the noise effects from that cleaning, because A, you're cleaning further away. If you look at the distance, you see the grocery store and the building there. There's literally maybe a couple of dozen stalls there that will be in that area that will be remotely close to, but the majority of the cleaning is certainly furthest away, right parallel on Clark. One last thing I would like to add on is that you can see from some of these questions the interconnectivity between through Keysite 2, and I just want to re-emphasize that we are happy and responsible to pay for the impacts that we create, but we know that we're not legally responsible for mitigation measures that we do not create, and that's why I would like some finding in there as to when we come to the creation of the intersection that, for example, Keysite 3, Keysite 2, remainder, and Keysite 1, that's an expensive intersection that can't be borne by just a small 6-acre parcel. Thank you.
Did you have any more rebuttal?
Unless anybody... Scott, Commissioner Cooney, if you have traffic concerns, I would say Scott Shell is probably the best one in our team to answer anything like that for you.
Much as I like to hear from Mr. Shell, I think my questions have been answered.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I do, for Mr. Shell.
Mr. Bridley?
Yeah.
Good morning, Scott Shell with Associated Transportation Engineers.
Thank you. So, my concern was that you got an LOSCF in the community plan with this, and that this is just one part of this development build out on Clark, and yet, and I understand everything about how the intersections are spaced, and essentially, Mr. Robertson has been vigilant in having an arterial intersection right here at the shopping center, but was there any analysis of the queuing up to the 101 Clark interchange, and do you have any information about when Caltrans is planning on widening that? And I'm thinking of lots of places in Carpinteria and South County that, as much as this is all well engineered, it doesn't help when your overcrossing is deficient. So I'm wondering when Caltrans is doing that, and are there mitigation measures in part of their ORCAD community plan required that actually go toward that interchange improvement?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bridley, that's a multi-point question there. So the traffic study did look at sort of near-term conditions. It included a couple scenarios because Keysite 4, as you've heard, is already under construction. So we had the foresight to look at what happens when we take current conditions and add both in Keysite 2 and Keysite 4. So there was a sort of interim scenario. With the signal that goes in, it's operating at level service A or B. So the queuing from the signal back to the interchange is going to be fine, particularly with the spacing that's been identified. With respect to the interchange improvements, Keysite 1 has taken the lead on that, and the plans have been submitted to Caltrans. They're already in the sort of review process. Part of the traffic study actually has the engineered drawings in it. It calls for the widening along Clark up to the interchange. And of course, we know the ramps are misaligned over on the northbound side, so they get aligned and a new signal goes in. And that's kind of the key part of that improvement. But it is underway, it's moving forward. going to be funded primarily through Keysite 1, but I think there's some other fair share mitigations that I think are going to be imposed on some of the remainder key sites that have to build out.
So in other words, as a traffic professional, you don't have any hesitation about the full build-out of all these key sites along Clark Avenue, having any kind of a queuing problem at 101 Clark in the next 10, 15 years after they're constructed? That's a pretty
Mr.
big
Robertson
loaded
has
question,
made
and I'm
it
sorry.
pretty clear that this has to be a pretty big intersection, and we've heard several comments as to the size of it, and it really has been sized to take into the remainder of Key Site 2. And because of that OCP density that we heard about, we assumed about 130,000 square feet down there, as well as all the additional units on Key Site 3, as well as another remainder piece on Key Site 1 that hasn't even been considered yet. So it has basically everything thrown in but the kitchen sink.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Questions?
Ms. Edie, did you have any response to Ms. Birch's question about hours of operation?
Chair Park, the timing that's in that mitigation measure is consistent with other projects that were approved in the past. There was a previously approved project on Key Site 1, 2008, and I believe that was approved with similar hours. So the applicant is requesting that. There is some parking area that is somewhat close to the residential areas down here. Otherwise, and then a little bit in this area here. Otherwise, what Mr. Morris said is true. I mean, the majority of the cleaning would occur here, so there is a buffer to these residences by the buildings that are located here. So I think that's really would be my response. So they'd be looking at increasing it. Right now, the condition says 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., so they'd be asking for 3 additional hours in the morning and then 3 additional at night to go to 12, to go to midnight.
Any further questions of Ms. Edie? Then we'll close the public hearing and open it for deliberations by the commission members. And it's your district? Mr.
Yeah, I wanted
Sweeney?
to see if Mr. Robertson could come up and talk a little bit about the right turn only.
Morning, Mr. Robertson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Farini.
Good morning. So in public comment, there was concern from the mobile home park that they will only have right turn ingress egress there.
Correct. So I think Gavin Moore, actually, and Paul Poirier made a really good comment earlier about how there was so much interconnectivity between 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's easy to get lost in the details here. So the quick answer to the question is that, which one do I push, the red one? Okay. As part of this project, this road is going to be connecting in to the existing Sunny Hills Road, which is right here. It's going to be part of the project. It's a given. The reason for that is because the project requires a left turn lane right here, which seals off the existing Sunny Hills Road, which is obviously the reason why Sunny Hills is very concerned about this. Because of the closeness between this intersection and the existing Sunny Hills Road, we cannot allow a left turn out, or it just creates kind of a dilemma zone and the potential for conflicts. But that's fine and dandy because the Sunny Hills residents will now be able to make a left here and come up to the signal. So the signal is basically the mitigation measure for the closure of this. So they actually gain a safer access point because they end up having assigned right of way right now, or with the signal, versus having to do this without any kind of assigned right of way.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I just wanted to make sure they got to hear from you. The other question they had was then at the Sunny Hills and the new road intersection there, they were talking about a stop sign.
So yes, the way this is, again, the problem with this project is we're actually having to, very rarely does the county have to do long-range transportation planning. So this has been quite a challenge because we're trying to figure out how to get all these pieces together. So the idea is Sunny Hills Drive or whatever it's got. Apparently, I learned today that it actually does not have a road name, but the existing Sunny Hills access will still be the main road. This project will come in, and under interim conditions, we will just apply one stop here. So it'll be coming in as close to a 90-degree angle as possible. Will be stop controlled, and this road here will continue to operate free flow.
Okay, that's great. So one stop sign.
That's the intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
I also want to clarify too, I think the commission has understood this, but part of this exercise, and I understand it was frustrating to the applicant, it was frustrating to the county, was the site had to be planned to allow for full build-out operations. So what you're seeing here is, I don't even want to say it is the answer for full build-out. It's one of the answers that works for full build-out. That it happened that Keysite 1 and Keysite 2 chose. There are other options. We could narrow the road down to less lanes, which Commissioner Park is concerned about the width of the road. But the problem with shrinking down the road means that these double left turn pockets now become single left turn pockets, which means the queuing will extend farther back and would have required a redesign of the intersection that the applicant had proposed. So there's a lot of moving things that we had to consider. I would agree. I don't think nobody wants to see this much pavement, but the other options change the site design. But in the interim, and we're looking forward to working with the applicant on this, we don't anticipate when they break ground that this is what you're going to see on the ground. You're going to see some condensed version of this until the time that the other developments come in.
And I'm not sure if this is in your purview, but the applicant has discussed how to keep them from being burdened with the expense, I think, of all of the signaling. Do you have anything, does the county have a way to help there? What do you know?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Farini, this one's an interesting intersection because the way we've operated in the past, the OTIP, the Orchid Transportation Improvement Plan, identified improvements, and those improvements we would collect money through mitigation fees to build the project. So a good example is what Commissioner Bradley was talking about, is the ramp intersections that are proposed to be signalized. Those are in the OTIP, those are funded by the OTIP, and fair share mitigation is payment of your fees. Best option is the county builds it. In this case, Mr. Schell was right. It is moving forward. Well, at least the northbound intersection is moving forward. And that, as a county project, will help alleviate a lot of the problems here. But this intersection was not identified, to answer your question. This is not identified in the OTIP. So we're not collecting fees for this intersection. A lot of other jurisdictions, and I had this phone conversation with the applicant earlier, it's kind of a waiting game in the development world. And I'm sure you're well aware of this. First one in has to build the impact because they're the one that creates the impact, and then everybody else kind of gets that benefit of what they created. So ideally, I think the county is supportive of some kind of master agreement or shared development agreement between Keysite 1, Keysite 2, and Keysite 3. But that's not something that our department has ever done before. So I would have to lean on county council if that's something that we can craft. Do all the developers have to participate in it? It's an unknown for me. I'm just going to be honest. So at this point, I think the only thing we can say is that first one in builds their impacts, builds to what they need to accommodate their project. That's what's required under law. And we have a master plan now for the intersection of what people can add to, unless everybody can come together and build the master intersection.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Any other deliberations by planning commissioners? Commissioner Bradley?
That's down, that's on. Okay, so that burden of doing that intersection is significant, and I completely follow what you're saying. This isn't part of the traffic mitigation fees that will be paid back, but you're saying that the county's never done a first in and then shared agreement or MOU with the developer. I mean, if I were sitting in the developer's chair, I'd be really concerned about that because they're going to, I'm not sure that the profit of this small shopping center is going to pay back the millions and millions of dollars that's going to cost. So maybe it's a question to staff and county council about if there's any kind of tool to do that. Like nowhere in the county that's actually been looked at.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Bridley, in the 18 years I've been doing this, I've never done one or participated in one. I'm not saying that there hasn't been
Okay.
an agreement. I know we've done development agreements before. I don't think we've done an agreement to this scale that required this many property owners to get involved, nor do I think we can force somebody to actually participate in this. So as much as I really want to answer the question, I'm way outside my authority there. It is a legal question on what we can and cannot require a developer to enter into.
Okay.
But I do agree. So, yeah, that's why I've said to the applicant, at this point, we haven't done a study, or at least the applicant hasn't, of what is required simply of this master plan. What components are required by their project to make it function? And it sounds like they've done a small portion of that, but I haven't seen it. So
Okay, because I guess I'm thinking of other cases and other agencies where they just build half the right-of-way. They just build half of it, and then you dedicate the remaining right-of-way to be built by future developers. But I'm probably getting into the weeds too much about it, but I think it's probably an important point for build-out along the Clark Avenue corridor because, you know, what they're essentially building is going to benefit 4 of the key sites, if I'm understanding this correctly, right, including a fairly large land area on Key Site 3. So I'm not sure what to do with it. My personal opinion is that it's a burden to this one developer, and I guess that's the risk of being a developer. However, it would be great if somebody could come to the top of the cream and say, oh, we'll work out a mutual agreement, and maybe it's the developer that has to, you know, carve it out with the other applicants, but that's just my opinion. Tagging onto that, I am very sensitive to what Commissioner Park said regarding the amount of pavement in the parking, the wide intersections for, you know, pedestrian travel. But again, this is, I'm going to point you to Camino Real in Goleta. When they put in double left turns out of Camino Real, and Will probably remembers this, Mr. Robertson remembers this, everybody thought that would never be needed, right? But as things get built out, and remember this driveway is going to be serving multiple sites, now the left turn, double left turn out onto Stork Avenue is, you know, you have to wait 2 or 3 signal cycles to get out of it. So as much as it doesn't look attractive, especially in the underdeveloped Clark Avenue corridor right now, I would prefer to plan for appropriate traffic build out in the next 25 years. So small editorial. Thank you.
Chair Park.
Commissioner Freeney.
So building on that, it would be good if we could, I don't know how all this works time-wise, but while we have this project and we know there is Key Site 1, Key Site 3, we have all of this interest. This is the next hub of activity for our county and all of the departments, that somehow we do come up with some type of pathway for the equal funding. And I would like to hear what Mr. Wilson and what county staff have to say in that light. Have we ever done anything, say, with different utilities, maybe with sanitation districts or special districts, that we've somehow have put these funds together? Maybe this applicant does pay it all, but the next applicant has to pay a pro rata share back that the county oversees in collection of those fees as the next development comes along.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Freeney, I guess it's my turn to talk finally. So I am aware of some cost sharing that went on at the first time when the Orchid Community Plan was adopted. There was a requirement to have regional retention basins. And so that rather than having each subdivision having an on-site basin, there was regional basins. And at that time, there was I think some cost sharing provisions for regional infrastructure in that way. That's the only thing I can recall as far as having a cost sharing component in the Orchid Community Planning area.
and in the county, but maybe council has some other language or thoughts too.
Chair and commissioners, I can't speak historically to what the county has done. What Mr. Zorovich was describing there sounds like it was achieved through the community plan, where there was a more global look at impacts. I would recommend that today you have a particular application for specific development, and your commission would be looking at the impacts of the proposed development and mitigation required. And at this point, in this setting, it would be beyond the scope of the commission's review to place conditions on projects for which there is not currently an application.
Well, I would like to ask someone from the applicant team to return to the podium, answer some questions in this regard. So you pick somebody. Do you have some proposal that we can consider right now? Because you've got a project in front of us right now, and you probably don't want to hear Commissioner Freeney or me or Commissioner Bradley say, well, let's take 6 months and continue this and study that.
So I do have a little bit of a suggestion. One, that we approve the EIR document, we approve the environmental document, we approve the findings of that document, we approve the project, and time is given to resolve the conditions of approval with County Council or Ms. Edie or Mr. Zorovich.
And do you have something to add?
Also, condition 23 in item attachment B2 talks about the cost to build the median, and that we're going to be paying for some portion of the median to be determined by Will's office, most likely, to make this thing function the way that he wants it to function for us on an interim basis, and that the cost for the median, there's going to be some mechanism to establish a reimbursement agreement to allow the cost of median construction to be shared on a pro rata basis with Keysite 1. So maybe that concept could be expanded to include some of the other improvements that are benefiting some of the other key sites, like the remainder of Keysite 2 or Keysite 3, things like that. So some of the language is in item 23. And then also I wanted to just note that in discussions with Will, and maybe Will can expound on this a little bit, this plan is showing the ultimate build out for what the intersection would look like if all of the key sites were built to maximum capacity, not necessarily what transportation is going to require of us to build to function for the existing uses at the Sunny Hills Park and our development and Keysite 4, which would be the things that are actually in reality. So we're talking about maybe in preliminary discussions amongst our team, building a single left turn lane that's going to the south, no right turn pockets to a non-existent Keysite 1, none of that top intersection, none of the street widening on the north side of the property, and maybe having a relocated median so that the roadway doesn't need to be widened across the utilities on the other side of the street, because it's certainly not anything that is affected by our project. Unless the other parties can all come together and say, hey, let's all pay for it now so we can do our thing. We just want to do our side of the street, up to the center line of the road.
Commissioner Cooney?
This is in the area of deliberation. You know, I think we're going far afield to address a problem that is created by the overall development of the area. And it's not our, in my view, it's not our task today to solve all problems for all the various development plans or thoughts, any more than it is to look at a development in Solvang that might affect future traffic patterns. I shirk the responsibility to suggest that our approval today would allow the applicant to build half of what is shown. Either we have a development plan to approve or we don't. And If they want to withdraw it and work it out with the other owners, that's up to them. But for our approval, we've been shown a plan, we've been shown a parcel map, and as far as I'm concerned, we need two left-hand pockets, two turn lanes eventually. So if this applicant is first up and ready to go, it's up to them to work it out with the county and with the other parties. Otherwise, we have to just pull it off and say we can't decide at this time, and bring it back when you all have some solution, which I doubt very much the applicant would choose.
I'm going to confess to being confused right now. I don't know if staff or county council has a response to the applicant's suggestion that they just made. And I join Commissioner Cooney with some frustration about not understanding what actually gets built if we approve this. I mean, I'm looking at this project site plan. Does that what gets built, or does something less get built? I'm just not getting it now. So I'm getting more confused and hungry. So if somebody can respond, Mr. Robertson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So I think ideally, and I understand the frustration, ideally, I think prior to this hearing, it would have been nice to see the exhibit that said, this is what's going to be built in the interim. We don't have it. Or, well, we did see something earlier, but staff hasn't.
What do you mean in the interim? I'm not getting it. What interim?
As part of the environmental review, the traffic study, Public Works' job is to make sure that existing project, cumulative projects, and build out can all be satisfied.
Right.
What you're seeing here is what came out of the process of Public Works arguing, we need to know what build out of this intersection is going to look like, because if you put a building, the gas station, if that gas station building was 50 feet to the west, then how would we ever build an intersection out? So we needed an analysis of what potential build out would look like. That allows the applicant to drop their buildings down. So that's what this was envisioning. What is build out going to look at this intersection? Allows the commission to know, hey, this is potentially what's going to happen with build out of all the key sites. Because in the Orcutt Community Plan, we talk about build out, but we never know what it looks like on the ground. So this was the exhibit to show what potential build out of all of them are going to look like. But if this, obviously no developer wants to come in and build for everybody else. I completely get that.
Yeah.
So the exhibit that apparently we saw earlier is, hey, here's our little piece of the puzzle that we're legally required to do. That's all we're missing here today.
Well, so if this project gets approved, who builds the public road there?
The developer.
Okay, and this gets approved, the developer's gonna build that road that we're looking at?
I would argue no. So that's the piece of the puzzle that I, as the developer, would say, I'm not building this either.
Yeah, and I get the equities that I argued, but sitting here today, I'm looking at a project site plan, and what I'm hearing is if I vote to approve the project, that won't be what gets built.
Mr. Chair.
Chair Park, just for a second, I think it would be, I'd like to have John Zorovich provide a little bit of clarification as far as how this proposal relates to the Orcutt Community Plan and what is before the decision makers today. So if we could just give John a little bit of ability to respond to this.
I'm glad to hear from
I'm a little bit concerned that we're going a little bit off center, and I'd like to go back to what Commissioner Cooney had indicated as far as what's before you today, and as echoed by, or stated earlier by the County Council. So if we could just give John a little bit of time to tie this together for you as far as what is the action before the commission today.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, again, what makes this a little challenging is we all understand this intersection is for quite a few developments. What is shown today is the development plan track map that this applicant is proposing to build. What I think is getting a little confusing is that there's this roadway that divides the parcel, and it's like, well, what is all these lanes and what does that mean and who's going to build what? So it's my understanding is that road as depicted is going to be built by the applicant. But this project may not need all those left turn lanes now because the rest of the projects that will send traffic to this intersection, primarily Key Site 3 to the south and Key Site possibly the other half of 2, which we don't see, is not needed now. So they will build a road, but my understanding is on some of those lanes, they may just be striped, that they won't be used. They need to set the dimensions of the intersection so that everybody knows where the roads are going to be, where the buildings are going to be placed, where the landscaping is going to be placed, so that there's some certainty that as the projects, other projects in the area go through the process, and if they're approved, this is what this intersection will look like. So the roads that you see are what will be built, paved. All the lanes that will now be used, if this site is the only one that gets developed in the interim, we may not have 2 left turn lanes because there may not be a need. There may only be 1 left turn lane leaving this site, and the other left turn lane may just be striped and reserved. We see that, I think everybody sees that on highways and such, extra lanes. So what you see is what's being proposed and will ultimately built. The roadway will be built. It's just that all the lanes may not be necessary at the initial part of this project development. They're reserved as the future area builds out.
Mr. Cooney.
Mr. Zorovich, don't you think that in deciding on this project, we need a better idea of what the roads are going to look like? Now, if what you're saying is take all those arrows off there and take that stripe out of the middle that separates the lanes, the width, the length, et cetera, is all going to be built. Then maybe I can imagine another exhibit that just shows that with the future to be determined. But what I don't want to approve is something that is 10 feet narrower or doesn't go as far, that stubs out someplace, you know, because this is the last time the Planning Commission's going to see this portion of the road. And we certainly want to be in compliance with what the Orchid Community Plan projected. I don't think in my time on the commission I've ever seen such a tentative build out of a crucial piece of it left to assume in the future. You know, maybe what we ought to do, Mr. Chair, is take a break, let the applicant consult with county staff and come up with a recommendation as to what we do today. I don't like the idea suggested by the representative, the applicant, that we approve the environmental findings or we approve the project in general, but let staff later work out the conditions. We need to approve the conditions because they're all tied in with those first 2 decisions. So that's just my view, but if staff supports the idea of a break to do some more talking about it so we know what we're voting on today, I think that would be positive.
Chair Park.
Commissioner Freeney?
Little different view, kind of the same path. I would rather we vote for the project before us and do away with any of this interpretation. That is the project. And I was simply asking a question, and I think Commissioner Bridley we were going down a path, is this possible? I think what we've learned today is not in current terms. We don't have that ability within our county structure. My thought is you approve, you put the project up for a vote. If it passes, the applicant now has a completed project, an approved project before them. Then it's up to them now to go out to the other surrounding property owners and get agreement on some type of a funding on the project. And if they can't get it and they decide that, as Commissioner Bridley said, it's too small of a project for that big of a financial burden on all of the traffic, then they'll simply have to wait until there's enough nexus there. But I don't want to get in the habit of having staff to interpret for me what part of a plan is real and one part of it is not. So that's my thoughts.
Does staff have a response to the suggestion from Commissioner Kenny that there be a break? And
So-
then
so-
I'll call on you, Commissioner Bradley.
Chair Park, members of the commission, staff would support a break if that would be the direction of the planning commission to be able to provide some clarification to some of the questions that is being proposed.
Commissioner Bradley?
I just want to say I concur with Commissioner Farini. And I didn't mean to go down that rabbit hole so much, but it kind of called the question. So I'm okay continuing to deliberate on the remaining conditions if the commission would prefer to do that.
I had hoped to be done with this by noon, and then we would be on our way. I think it's premature to break for lunch for an hour, which is what I'll do if it's a break for lunch, and then think we'll come back to this. So what I want to do now is break for 5 minutes. Staff can confer amongst themselves and with the applicant if necessary, and then advise us as what they think we should do. here? Yeah. Poor Dan, is he gone home? Where's Dan? Good. All right. We're going to resume in 30 seconds. Timing.
Okay.
All right, we're back in session, and I think we're waiting to hear from some member of our staff as to what's been the result of your discussions.
Chair Park, members of the commission, I'm going to try to simplify this. It is very, it got a little complex. So what's before you today is the first of several development projects along the Clark Avenue near the 101. So this is the first project. So what's before you is what is being presented as what is being proposed and what will be built. So where things became confusing is when we start talking about the other projects that are in the queue that are under either environmental review or some other type of design that aren't before you today. So to demystify or to clarify what's before you today is shown on the slide. So the applicants are proposing this layout and this design to be built. So what you're reviewing and considering today is what's before you on this slide. Where, to provide some clarification, what is shown accommodates full build out of Key Site 1 and Key Site 3. So the dimensions of that Clark Avenue signal is being shown and depicted as to accommodate the full build out of Key Site 1, 2, and 3. The applicant is proposing this, and they will initiate all that development and improvements on their site as required. And as required, they will have to make the improvements to that signalization as being triggered by their development. So where things became confusing, and then we start talking about the alignment of the median and where Key Site 1 comes in and striping. So I think we're getting too deep into the details of that. So what you're approving today is these dimensions, and these dimensions will accommodate full build out. However, the applicant is only required to do the build out up to the median. When Key Site 1 comes in, they will be required to do the build out to accommodate their development. And so that final alignment of that median is going to be triggered by what Key Site 1 is going to be introducing into that signalization. But before you today is approving that full dimensions of that project, and it'll accommodate the traffic or circulation from Key Site 1 as well as what could be introduced by Key Site 3. So what you're approving today is that full dimension and what is responsible by Key Site 2 as far as building. And there are conditions that are already set forth to provide certain benchmarks and triggers for when Key Site 1 comes on board and their requirement to coordinate with Public Works as far as the alignment and left turn lanes. So part of the struggle today is that we're talking about a small portion of the development as well as bigger portions of the development, and we're getting kind of tripped up on how all those things are linking together. So what we're doing today is this is the first puzzle piece of the development in that area. And so what we're approving today and what's before you for consideration is Key Site 2 and this layout and dimension. So to answer Commissioner Cooney, what you're approving today is what is going to be built, full build out. Part of that, and as conditioned, will be when Key Site 2 connects to this and what will be required for them as far as the signalization and the alignment and how those payments will go. So I hope that provides some clarification. In addition, John Zorvich, or Mr. Zorvich, it will be available for questions, as well as the applicant's road engineer, Scott Shell, could provide any communications on that to clarify that.
Okay, I appreciate your clarification, and I'm going to simplify it even further just for purposes of procedure, what we're going to do. The applicants brought up an interesting point about cost sharing. Obviously, there's been some sympathetic response from members of the commission, but we have a project in front of us today. If it's approved, then there won't be further negotiation with the county. about what the conditions of approval are and what they mean. I mean, it will be an approval of what you have in front of you. And if it's approved today, then there will impact the ability to negotiate further with other key site owners. So we can take this up or down today, and the project will be what it is. Or if the applicant believes that there needs to be some negotiation of some cost-sharing arrangement beyond what you can do once this project is approved, then you should request a continuance. And so it's kind of up to you folks, the applicant. What do you want to do? We're certainly not going to take a lunch break and negotiate a cost-sharing agreement over lunch. I won't. Well, you're assuming you'll get approval. You'll take the up or down today. Okay, there you are then. Do we have any further deliberations by members of the commission who are holding up my lunch? Oh, Commissioner Cooney.
I just wanted to break it into bites that we have. We have some requests from the applicant to adjust certain things. We've got some minor conditional use permits on the signs, and so however Commissioner Farini wants to take them up, we could vote or we could deliberate on those and then vote one by one. But I'll just toss it out. One of the requests to the applicant is to expand the areas of parking lot cleaning, expand the hours of parking lot cleaning. And I am sensitive to the noise that would create at various times. I don't care if it's in front of the building or not, but I think the idea of doing that between 9 p.m. and midnight is way too interruptive to the surrounding and existing neighbors.
Why don't we,
Commissioner Farini.
why don't we
I thought
stay
you
on the
moved.
parking lot cleaning then and try to develop some hours that we're all comfortable with, that we think will work? And
Basic
What do you
question,
say?
and I see Ms. Edie getting ready to go to the microphone, so I got a question for you. You've got recommendations in your staff report. I assumed that those were the same as what the applicant wants, but am I understanding there's some disagreement now?
Chair Park, I don't think there's a disagreement. I was going to maybe make a recommendation about the parking lot cleaning hours, if you would like.
I would like to hear from
Okay.
you on that, yeah.
One thing your commission could consider doing is conditioning the project so that the hours for the parking lot cleaning that would occur on Lot 3, which is the parking that's in closest proximity to the residences, that occur between the 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. hours, and then potentially allow the remaining lots that have parking that are further away to go from 6 a.m. to midnight. We could condition it that way.
But what do the conditions of approval that you've recommended say? I'm not.
Currently, the condition just says that the parking lot be limited to weekend days between the hours of 6 a.m. and midnight. 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., excuse me.
So the 6 a.m. to midnight is a request by the applicant. That's not part of the recommendation that you've made.
That is correct. That is a request by the applicant.
Any comments from Commissioner Farini?
yes, Ms. Edie, did you say what days is in your current recommendation?
Currently, it states weekend days. It says parking lot cleaning shall be limited to weekend days between the hours of 9 a.m. and 9 p.m.
So just Saturday and Sunday then?
Currently, yes.
Sorry, Commissioner, Mr. Chair, that's actually on page 12 of B2. So I would
I'll call on you, Commissioner Bradley.
Thank you. Just jumped in there again. Sorry. I would actually concur with leaving the condition as it's written in the staff report and not extend those hours as requested by the applicant. That's my thinking.
Commissioner Farini.
Perhaps we could think about allowing them to begin at, say, 8 o'clock in the morning on 1 or 2. It's only 1 or 2 days as written, so if we gave them an extra hour in the morning, and then they can at least have some freedom there. I don't think it even would take an hour to clean the place, so.
Commissioner Bradley.
I would be okay with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well,
As an epitaph too, all the other requested revisions to their conditions seemed acceptable to me, so I'm not sure if the commission wants to continue talking about those revisions.
Well, Commissioner Farini, again, it's your district. You want to make a motion that covers whatever you want to cover?
Well, there's a couple ways we could do it. There's a letter from the applicant dated August 13th. And that's where they set forth their requested changes on the conditions. And if after discussion we all find that appropriate and approve, I would move that we approve those with the exception of item 1 in their letter, attachment B2, condition 22. We would allow that to change to 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. for parking lot cleaning.
Commissioner Cooney.
Well, Mr. Chair, just to move it along and get you to lunch, I am supportive of the project as submitted to us today. And my problem was not understanding clearly what was being submitted to us today. And I would urge staff to try and clarify in advance in the future so that we don't have this kind of trip up on future projects. But with regard to this project and this chunk of a much larger picture, I support Commissioner Farini in whatever other limitations he might suggest with regard to the project.
We just need a motion.
We just need a motion. Okay, so that was the first part of the motion. We've got that on the changes.
Does
And-
staff understand what the motion is?
Yes. And
So
then,
Chair Park, sorry.
go ahead.
I think we got a portion of the motion. I think Commissioner Finney is trying to, are you going to give us the full motion for the full project? I think
Yes,
we're
sir.
unclear on what the motion
We're
is.
getting
right now.
ready. Okay.
All right, you go
So I
for it.
just was clarifying that we all understood the first part of the motion, and then to complete the rest of the motion, I would support staff's request as stated on page 1 and 2 of their report, and follow recommendations on page 2 and 3 of their report.
Mr. Chair, if that's the motion, it should also include any changes or modifications to the conditions as identified in the applicant's letter as well.
Agreed. That was the first part.
That was
but
the first
that's
part, right.
that's fine. We'll do it in that order. Got it. And that was we're accepting their letter, the changes requested in their letter, except for in item 1, we agree to move that to 8 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock in the evening for the cleaning.
Correct.
Is this sufficiently clear to staff and county council what the motion is? Hearing no objection, it must be. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further deliberations? No? Then, Mr. Villalobos, will you conduct the roll call vote?
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney,
Aye.
Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Chair Park.
Aye. And I'm going to add a comment, though. I really appreciate the considerable amount of time that so many people, dedicated people, all the property owners and staff and property owners, consultants have put into this to make this all work. I appreciate that. I think looking at this big picture, that we're providing a really essential service and more safety for, I think we heard 400 tenants, which is probably 600 to 700 residents of those mobile home parks, and this is a really good thing. So, there.
Motion passes 4-0.
Yeah.
Unless somebody wants to come back after lunch, we're going to adjourn the meeting.